Welcome back, my friends, to another chilling journey into the dark corners of history. Tonight, we're stepping inside the cold steel doors, through crumbling stone walls, and into the restless echoes of America's most haunted prisons. These are places where suffering, despair, and death have left behind more than just memories. They've left shadows, voices, and spirits that refuse to be silenced. These are America's 25 scariest haunted prisons that are pure evil. If you think the living inmates were terrifying, wait until you hear about the ones that never left. The Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia stands like a scar against the skyline, its Gothic stone walls towering with an oppressive weight that seems almost alive. Opened in 1829, it was not just another prison, it was a social experiment. This fortress introduced the Pennsylvania system, a radical idea that complete isolation could reform criminals. Inmates were locked away in small, vaulted cells, each with a tiny skylight, symbolically referred to as the Eye of God. The intention was for prisoners to sit alone with their thoughts, repent, and emerge rehabilitated. Instead, many of them descended into madness. Silence became suffocating. The stillness, broken only by the faint shuffle of chains or the distant clang of iron doors, worked its way into the mind like a poison. Prisoners lived in solitude for years, forbidden from speaking, singing, or even seeing another human face. Hoods were placed over their heads whenever they were moved, ensuring anonymity and silence. What began as an attempt at spiritual reflection quickly became psychological torture. Guards recorded inmates pacing endlessly in their cells, muttering to themselves, scratching at the walls, or weeping uncontrollably. Some prisoners were driven so far into despair that they clawed at their own flesh or begged to be put to death. The fortress itself seemed to feed on this despair. Long corridors stretched into darkness, lined with iron-barred doors that hid broken men. Echoes carried strangely through the halls, murmurs that could not be traced, metallic groans from no visible source. Those sounds were unnerving in the 1800s, and they remain so to this day. Eastern State became infamous not only for its architecture of isolation, but also for its punishments. Though silence was the prison's main tool, there were darker methods reserved for those who broke the rules. One device, the iron gag, forced an inmate's mouth open with a bar of metal while their hands were shackled behind their back. But these punishments broke both body and mind. Over time, word spread of strange happenings within the prison walls. Guards, hardened men accustomed to violence and suffering, began whispering of figures moving through the darkened halls when no inmates were present. Doors would slam shut on their own, heavy wooden portals rattling violently as if shaken by unseen hands. Cold spots and natural chills in otherwise stagnant air were often reported, particularly in cell block 12. That cell block became notorious for its oppressive atmosphere, the site of countless sightings of shadowy figures that lurked just beyond the edges of vision. Visitors even today claim to hear muffled voices, their hoarse whispers, drifting down the corridor, sometimes calling their names. Eastern State also housed some of America's most infamous criminals, and their ghosts are said to linger. Al Capone, the notorious Chicago mob boss, spent time in the prison in the 1920s. His cell was more luxurious than most, with rugs, furniture, and even a radio. Yet despite his comfort, Capone was tormented. He told guards and visitors alike that he was haunted by the ghost of James Clark, one of the victims of the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Capone claimed he could hear Clark's voice crying out in his cell at night, accusing him, demanding retribution. Even after Capone was released, he never escaped those visions. Today, tourists who stand in Capone's preserved cell often report feeling sudden waves of unease, as though someone unseen is standing just behind them. The prison officially closed in 1971, left to decay 4 years before preservation efforts began. But its abandonment only seemed to intensify its aura. Paranormal investigators from around the world have flocked to the site, and almost all leave with chilling stories. Some describe hearing the dragging of chains across the stone floors, even though the prison has been empty for decades. Others report loud cries that reverberate from cell to cell, though no living soul could have made them. A number of visitors swear they've felt icy fingers brush against their arms, or a sudden grip on the shoulder, only to turn and find no one there. Perhaps the most unsettling reports come from those who wander the halls alone. In cell block 12, people have captured photographs of dark humanoid shapes, sometimes looming in doorways, other times stretching impossibly tall against the corridor walls. In cell block 6, phantom footsteps echo in locked and empty spaces. And in the central rotunda, where the prison's corridors branch out like the spokes of a wheel, some visitors claim to have heard chanting, low, resonant voices, rising and falling as if in some forgotten ritual. Skeptics argue that the prison's legends are just a result of suggestive atmosphere, the long shadows, the heavy stone walls, the tragic history. But those who have felt the cold hand on their skin, or who have heard whispers in the silence, insist otherwise. They say that Eastern State is not merely haunted, it's cursed, forever marked by the cruelty and suffering inflicted within its walls. Perched on a rocky island in the middle of San Francisco Bay, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, known simply as The Rock, remains one of the most infamous prisons in American history. From the moment it opened as a federal facility in 1934, it was intended to house the nation's most dangerous and unmanageable criminals. The kind of men too violent or too cunning to be contained anywhere else. Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, Robert Stroud, the so-called Birdman of Alcatraz, and countless others lived out their sentences here, in a place where escape was nearly impossible, and survival was a daily battle. But long after the prison shut its doors in 1963, the whispers of its former residents still echo within its crumbling walls. Many believe Alcatraz is more than just a historic ruin. It is one of the most haunted places in the United States. The prison's reputation for cruelty is well documented. Isolation, strict routines, and harsh punishments defined life on the island. Prisoners often endured years of confinement in small, cold cells with little more than a bed and a toilet. Communication was minimal, recreation was limited, and hope was a rare luxury. Guards and inmates alike reported strange occurrences during the prison's operational years, as if the building itself absorbed the suffering of those trapped inside. Today, visitors and staff claim that the energy of pain and despair has never left. One of the most haunted areas is D Block, the notorious row of solitary confinement cells reserved for the most difficult or dangerous prisoners. Known as the Hole, these cells were dark, cold, and designed to strip away every sense of humanity. Men confined here often emerged broken, both physically and mentally. Even now, tourists describe feeling overwhelming dread upon stepping inside. Some report sudden drops in temperature, as if an invisible presence brushes past them. Others hear the faint rattling of chains, or the slam of cell doors echoing down the corridor when no one else is there. Shadows seem to shift at the edge of vision, too quick to catch but too real to ignore. One cell in particular, D14, carries a chilling legend. Stories tell of a prisoner locked inside who screamed through the night about a monstrous figure with glowing eyes stalking him in the darkness. By morning, the guards found him dead. Some claimed his face was frozen in terror, as though he had been strangled by unseen hands. To this day, people standing near D14 report a sense of suffocation, icy fingers brushing against their skin, and the eerie feeling that they are not alone. But the hauntings are not confined to D Block. Throughout the prison, phantom footsteps are heard pacing in empty hallways. Doors clang shut when no one is nearby. Disembodied voices call out in the stillness, sometimes in hushed whispers, sometimes in desperate wails. Guards in the 1940s and 1950s spoke of hearing sobs and moans in the dead of night, only to find every prisoner accounted for. Even seasoned correctional officersmen trained to be skeptical admitted that Alcatraz had a darkness they could not explain. The prison's most famous inmate, Al Capone, is also said to linger on the island. During his years at Alcatraz, Capone's health deteriorated rapidly, and he often isolated himself, fearing attacks from other prisoners. He spent hours playing the banjo in the prison's shower area, reportedly one of the few places he felt safe. Today, some visitors and staff claim they still hear the faint plucking of a banjo drifting through the empty rooms, as though Capone himself is still hiding in the shadows, playing to drown out the cries of those he wronged. The hospital wing is another source of unease. Once used to treat sick and mentally unstable inmates, it carries a heavy atmosphere of despair. People report hearing screams from unseen patients and the rattling of gurney wheels across the floor. Some even claim to see fleeting apparitions in hospital gowns moving silently through the halls. The operating room, where desperate procedures were performed, is particularly unsettling. Visitors often describe sudden dizziness or nausea while standing inside, as though the suffering of those who once lay on the tables is etched into the very walls. Outside the prison, the waters of San Francisco Bay only deepen the island's haunted reputation. Cold, strong currents made escape nearly impossible, yet dozens of prisoners tried. Most were captured or drowned, but the mystery of their final moments lingers. On foggy nights, some say they hear desperate cries for help coming from the water, or see ghostly shapes struggling against invisible waves. Whether these are echoes of doomed escape attempts or something darker is left to the imagination. What makes Alcatraz so unsettling is not just the ghostly activity, but the weight of its history. For nearly 3 decades, it was a place where hope went to die, where men were stripped of freedom, humanity, and sometimes sanity. The energy of such intense suffering, combined with violent deaths, executions, and failed escapes, has given rise to an environment that many believe cannot rest. Today, Alcatraz is a popular tourist attraction, visited by thousands each year. Yet even in the light of day, with the chatter of tour groups and the distant sound of boats crossing the bay, the prison feels cold, as though its walls still hold secrets. When night falls and the crowds leave, the island grows eerily quiet. The wind howls through the abandoned corridors. Footsteps echo where none should walk, and the prison reminds us why it earned its reputation as a place of despair. For those brave enough to visit, Alcatraz offers a chilling glimpse into both the history of crime and punishment in America and the lingering mysteries of the paranormal. It is a place where shadows are never just shadows, where silence is never truly silent, and where the ghosts of the past seem unwilling to let go. Even after decades of abandonment, the rock remains alive with echoes of pain, fear, and restless spirits, forever haunting the dark waters of San Francisco Bay. The West Virginia Penitentiary in Moundsville stands as one of the most foreboding and haunted locations in the United States. From the moment its gates first opened in 1876 until its closure in 1995, this massive Gothic structure bore witness to nearly every kind of human suffering imaginable. With its towering stone walls and menacing turrets, the prison was designed not just to confine but to intimidate. Over the course of more than a century, it became a place marked by violence, executions, riots, and death. Today, long after the last inmate was removed, the penitentiary continues to echo with the restless energies of those who never truly left. Visitors, paranormal investigators, and staff all describe chilling encounters that suggest the prison remains a dwelling place for the spirits of the tormented. The penitentiary was originally constructed to hold just a few hundred inmates, but by the mid-20th century, it housed well over 1,000. This severe overcrowding led to deplorable living conditions. The cells were small, often cramming 2 or 3 men into a space barely large enough for one. Disease, violence, and desperation festered within these stone walls. The prison became notorious for its brutal riots, with one of the deadliest occurring in 1986, when inmates seized control of parts of the facility and left several people dead. These moments of chaos, fueled by fear and rage, seemed to carve scars not only into the history of the prison, but into its very foundation. Executions also defined the penitentiary's grim legacy. For many years, hangings were carried out in full view of witnesses. Later, the electric chair, ominously nicknamed Old Sparky, became the instrument of death. At least 94 men were executed within the penitentiary, some of whom proclaim their innocence with their final breaths. Those who have toured the prison claim that the execution chamber remains one of the most unsettling areas, filled with an oppressive heaviness that cannot be explained away. Some visitors have reported feeling sudden nausea, while others claim to hear faint moans or smell the distinct odor of burning, as though echoes of the electric chair linger in the air. Yet executions were not the only source of death inside these walls. Countless inmates were murdered by fellow prisoners, and guards were not immune to violence either. Many were beaten, stabbed, or even bludgeoned to death in the line of duty. Such violent ends seem to have left behind powerful imprints. For many who walk the abandoned halls today, report seeing shadowy figures lurking just out of sight. These dark shapes are often described as darting across corridors or standing silently at the ends of cell blocks before fading into nothingness. Paranormal investigators have captured strange photos and videos in the prison, with unexplained orbs of light, misty forms, and human-like silhouettes appearing in empty rooms. One of the most infamous haunted locations within the prison is the basement area, known as the Sugar Shack. This was once a recreation space for inmates, but it quickly became a place of violence and suffering. Out of the watchful eye of the guards, prisoners turned the Sugar Shack into a site of gambling, assaults, and unspeakable acts. Today, people who enter the dark, windowless chamber describe overwhelming feelings of anger and dread. Many claim to hear disembodied voices shouting or whispering in the darkness. Some have even reported being physically touched or shoved by unseen forces. Paranormal teams who spend time in the Sugar Shack often leave shaken, convinced they encountered something malevolent and deeply disturbed. Cell Block 5 is another area that is frequently associated with supernatural encounters. Visitors have reported hearing phantom screams echoing through the halls, often so loud and sudden that groups have panicked and fled the building. Some claim these cries belong to former inmates who suffered violent deaths during riots or attacks. Others describe seeing full-bodied apparitions of prisoners dressed in old uniforms, pacing the length of their cells as if forever trapped in a cycle of confinement. What is most chilling is that these apparitions are sometimes seen by multiple witnesses at the same time, lending weight to the belief that the penitentiary is one of the most haunted prisons in the world. The oppressive atmosphere of the prison affects nearly everyone who steps inside. Tour guides have grown accustomed to sudden drops in temperature, icy drafts that cut through even the warmest summer days, and the sensation of being watched from the shadows. Electronic voice phenomena, or EVPs, are commonly recorded in the prison, with chilling messages such as "Help me, get out," or the echo of names being whispered in response to investigators' questions. These voices, captured in empty cell blocks, suggest that the tormented souls of the penitentiary still seek acknowledgement. Even skeptics find it difficult to explain away the sheer number of paranormal experiences reported here. With more than a century of violence, misery, and death, the penitentiary is a place where tragedy has seeped into every stone. Whether it is the weight of human memory or something far darker, the spirits of Moundsville's prison do not rest quietly. The walls hold too much suffering, and the ground itself has been soaked in blood. For those who walk through the West Virginia Penitentiary today, the experience is more than a history lesson. It is a brush with the echoes of the past, a confrontation with the possibility that the energy of anguish does not simply vanish. Instead, it lingers, shaping the atmosphere, manifesting as voices, shadows, and unseen presences. The penitentiary stands as both a monument to human cruelty and a chilling reminder that some places never let go of the lives lost within their walls. The Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield, Ohio, is one of the most imposing and infamous prisons in America. Constructed in 1886 and opening its doors in 1896, the prison was originally intended to reform young offenders through education, religion, and hard work. Its castle-like architecture, blending Romanesque and Gothic revival styles, gave the building a grand and intimidating presence. But behind its beautiful exterior, the reformatory became a place of despair, violence, and death. Over the years, The prison developed a dark reputation that lingers to this day. Long after its official closure in 1990, today, it stands not only as a relic of the past, but also as one of the most haunted sites in the United States. The prison is perhaps best known to mainstream audiences as the filming location for the acclaimed movie, The Shawshank Redemption. But for those who have walked its halls outside of Hollywood's glow, the reality is far darker. The Ohio State Reformatory is said to be filled with restless spirits, shadowy figures, and the echoes of long-forgotten screams. Paranormal investigators, tourists, and staff alike have reported spine-chilling encounters, making it one of the most notorious hotspots for ghostly activity in the Midwest. One of the most common paranormal reports involves the sound of heavy cell doors slamming shut, even though the prison has been abandoned for decades. Visitors often describe hearing the metallic clang reverberate through the empty blocks, as if unseen forces are still locking away prisoners. Some claim to hear the sound of footsteps pacing back and forth within the cells, though no one is physically there. These noises are often accompanied by sudden, overwhelming feelings of dread, as if the suffering of past inmates still lingers thick in the air. The reformatory's East Cell Block, which remains the largest freestanding steel cell block in the world, is said to be one of the most active areas. Stretching 6 tiers high, the block is a towering wall of cages, where countless men spent their days in misery. Many of them died here, whether by suicide, disease, or murder at the hands of fellow inmates. Visitors who step into the cell block often report seeing fleeting shadows darting between the cells or peering from the barred doors. Some claim to feel an icy hand brush against their skin, while others have heard whispers calling their name in the dead of night. Another hotspot is the solitary confinement wing, where inmates were locked away for weeks in isolation. Conditions here were brutal, with prisoners kept in near-total darkness and silence. Many lost their sanity, and some never emerged alive. It is in these cells that shadow figures are most often reported, tall dark forms that seem to watch from the corners before disappearing into the walls. Paranormal investigators, using EVP electronic voice phenomena, have captured chilling recordings here. Phrases such as "help me" and "let me out" have been documented, leading many to believe that the tormented souls of the confined still linger. The reformatory also has stories tied to its staff. In the warden's quarters, tragedy struck when the warden's wife was accidentally killed by a mishandled firearm. Guests exploring this part of the prison have reported smelling her perfume lingering in the halls, even though no source could be found. Some have claimed to see her apparition moving silently through the rooms, as if still tied to the home where her life abruptly ended. Her presence adds another layer of sorrow to the already heavy atmosphere of the prison. The chapel, once a place meant to offer inmates spiritual salvation, is another area rife with supernatural activity. Visitors have described sudden temperature drops, feelings of being watched, and the sensation of unseen hands pressing down on their shoulders during tours. Shadows have been seen darting across the altar, and some have even heard faint hymns sung by disembodied voices, as though a ghostly congregation still gathers in prayer. What makes the Ohio State Reformatory so terrifying is not just the sheer volume of paranormal reports, but the intensity of the experiences. Unlike some haunted locations where activity feels sporadic, here it seems constant, as if the entire structure is soaked in decades of anguish. From the clang of unseen doors to the cries of long-dead prisoners, the building feels alive with energy that refuses to fade. Paranormal investigators from around the country have flocked to Mansfield to document its haunted reputation. Countless photographs show unexplained mists, shadowy figures, and glowing orbs. Video footage has captured doors moving on their own, and EVPs remain one of the most consistent forms of evidence gathered here. For many who visit, the experience is so intense that they leave shaken, convinced that they've walked among the spirits of the dead. The Ohio State Reformatory stands today as both a museum and a monument to the suffering endured by thousands of inmates. Its haunted reputation continues to grow, drawing thrill-seekers, historians, and paranormal enthusiasts alike. But whether one comes for history or for ghost hunting, it is impossible to ignore the heavy atmosphere of despair that still clings to its walls. The reformatory remains a place where the past refuses to die, where ghostly wardens still patrol the halls, where inmates beg for freedom they never found in life, and where shadows wait silently in the darkness. ChatGPT said, Joliet Correctional Center in Joliet, Illinois, is a place where history and horror intertwine. Built in 1858, this massive prison once held some of the most dangerous criminals in the country. Its towering limestone walls and fortress-like appearance gave it an intimidating presence that warned outsiders of what lay inside. For more than a century, Joliet was synonymous with punishment, fear, and despair. Behind its gates, countless stories of suffering, violence, and death played out. Though the prison officially closed in 2002, its ghostly echoes remain, and today it is regarded as one of the most haunted penitentiaries in America. The moment you step onto the grounds of Joliet, the air feels heavier, as if the walls themselves still breathe with the memories of those who lived and died within. Former inmates and guards described the prison as a place where hope was stripped away, and the harshness of reality never let go. Executions, violent fights, suicides, and the crushing solitude of confinement all contributed to a legacy of torment that seems to have stained the very stones of the facility. Visitors who come to the abandoned site today often report chilling sensations before they even cross the threshold. Many describe an unnatural coldness seeping through the air, even on warm summer days. Some feel as if invisible eyes are watching them, tracking every step through the empty corridors. Shadows flicker across the crumbling cell blocks, where no living person stands, and the sound of footsteps follows guests, echoing through the halls long after the prison was left deserted. One of the most common reports involves disembodied voices. Whispered conversations drift through the air, sometimes clear enough to make out pleas for help or angry curses. Tour guides and paranormal investigators alike have recorded unexplained audio that captures moans, cries, and even the rattling of cell doors that no longer function. It is as though the voices of inmates from decades past still linger, trapped in a cycle of anguish and unrest. The cell blocks themselves carry a particularly oppressive energy. Rows of decaying iron bars stretch endlessly, each cell once crammed with men living under harsh conditions. Today, people walking those blocks often claim to hear the sound of cell doors slamming shut, loud, metallic crashes that reverberate through the empty space, yet no one is there to close them. In some cases, entire tour groups have jumped at once when a phantom door clanged so forcefully that it shook the air. Paranormal researchers have suggested that these are residual echoes, moments of intense emotion replaying like a recording imprinted on the environment. Perhaps the most unnerving encounters involve full-bodied apparitions. Eyewitnesses have reported seeing figures in prison uniforms walking through locked gates or appearing suddenly in corridors before vanishing into thin air. Guards, in particular, are said to haunt the grounds. Some speculate that these spectral wardens remain to keep watch over the prison, bound to their duties even after death. Visitors describe the eerie sensation of being stared at by unseen eyes, often followed by the fleeting vision of a stern man in uniform who disappears when approached. One infamous location within the prison is the segregation unit, where the most violent or uncooperative inmates were sent. Conditions there were brutal long hours in near darkness, minimal food, and overwhelming silence. Those who enter the segregation area today report a suffocating dread that seems to sink into their very bones. Shadow figures have been spotted darting across the narrow halls, and sudden temperature drops leave guests shivering uncontrollably. Some investigators have even claimed that aggressive spirits in this part of the prison lash out at the living, scratching or pushing them as they try to leave. The prison's reputation for violence is well documented. Joliet was home to countless riots, assaults, and murders. The energy of so much rage and suffering is said to fuel the paranormal activity that saturates the site. In the mess hall, for example, visitors claim to hear phantom clattering of trays and muffled arguments, as though the spirits of inmates still gather there. The chapel, once a place of attempted solace, is another hotspot. Many have reported seeing ghostly figures kneeling in prayer, their heads bowed in eternal penitence. Cold drafts are another common phenomenon. Tourists often walk through corridors where icy air suddenly surrounds them, despite there being no broken windows or open doors to explain the chill. Investigators using thermal cameras have documented drastic temperature fluctuations that occur without reason. These cold spots often coincide with moments of other paranormal activity, such as footsteps or voices, leading many to believe they are signs of ghostly presence. While the prison's dark history may explain much of the haunting, some believe that Joliet is more than just a place of restless spirits. They argue that the sheer weight of human suffering experienced within its walls has created a permanent scar, a place where the boundary between the living and the dead is thin. This theory suggests that Joliet isn't just haunted by specific individuals, but by the very essence of pain and despair left behind by thousands of souls. The Missouri State Penitentiary in Jefferson City has long carried a reputation as one of the darkest and most terrifying prisons in America. Known ominously as the bloodiest 47 acres in America, this sprawling complex was more than just a place of confinement. It was a place of violence, despair, and death. And even decades after its closure, the energy of suffering seems to linger within its walls. For nearly 170 years, the penitentiary was a house of punishment and fear, and the echoes of its grim past continue to haunt it. The prison opened in 1836, making it one of the oldest in the United States, and it quickly earned notoriety for its brutality. Overcrowding and poor conditions created an environment of misery, and violent clashes between inmates were a constant reality. The penitentiary became a self-contained world of pain, where guards ruled with harsh discipline, and prisoners lived and died under constant threat of attack. By the time it closed in 2004, thousands of inmates had perished, some from disease, others from executions, and many through acts of sudden, bloody violence. This legacy of suffering left an imprint so heavy that those who step inside today often report the air itself feels oppressive, as though the walls are steeped in anguish. Ghost stories here are plentiful, and some of the most terrifying experiences come from the infamous death row and gas chamber. Visitors to the old death row wing describe hearing metallic clanging, footsteps pacing the cells, and whispered voices that seem to rise and fall in the darkness. Investigators with recording equipment have captured EVPs of desperate men pleading for mercy, their voices etched forever into the prison's atmosphere. Some describe seeing shadow figures lurking at the ends of long corridors, darting in and out of cells, or even crawling along the walls in unnatural ways that defy explanation. These sightings leave many chilled to the bone, convinced that the violent energy of executed prisoners never truly left. The gas chamber remains the most chilling sight within the penitentiary. Between 1938 and 1989, dozens of men met their end within its green-tiled walls. Those who enter today often speak of an almost unbearable heaviness in the air. Some say they feel sudden nausea, while others describe an overwhelming sense of dread that drives them out of the room. Paranormal groups who have investigated the chamber have reported capturing audio evidence of men gasping for breath, as though their final moments are being replayed on an endless loop. The oppressive silence of the chamber is often shattered by unexplained bangs or voices, making it one of the most feared spots in the entire prison. But the hauntings are not confined to the execution chamber. In the general population cell blocks, visitors report hearing phantom screams echoing through the empty halls. Doors are said to slam shut on their own, and icy drafts sweep through otherwise still corridors. Many have seen full-bodied apparitions of inmates, often described as gaunt men in ragged prison uniforms, silently pacing their cells as though trapped in an endless cycle. Others have encountered the presence of former guards, still patrolling the grounds as if their duty never ended. These spirits seem bound to the penitentiary, forever connected to the site of their suffering and violence. Perhaps the most unsettling reports come from those who have ventured into the dungeon-like underground areas. These dark, claustrophobic spaces once held inmates in solitary confinement, cut off from light and sound. People who enter these spaces often leave quickly, claiming the atmosphere is thick with malice. Some describe hearing breathing behind them, only to find themselves alone. Others have felt unseen hands grab their arms or shove them forward. It is as though the rage and despair of the forgotten prisoners still dwell in the darkness, reaching out to anyone who dares step inside. The Missouri State Penitentiary's haunted reputation has made it a magnet for paranormal investigators, television crews, and thrill seekers. Many leave convinced that something unnatural still moves within the old cell blocks. The combination of violent history, countless deaths, and emotional torment seems to have embedded itself deep into the structure. The stories of shadow figures crawling along walls, voices crying out in desperation, and the choking terror of the gas chamber paint a picture of a place where time never truly ended for those who died there. Today, the prison stands as both a historic landmark and a place of horror. Tour groups walk through its crumbling halls, feeling the lingering weight of the past. Some come for history, others for the thrill of encountering the paranormal. But nearly all who enter leave with the same impression that the penitentiary is not empty. The suffering of the inmates, the cruelty of the punishments, and the terror of execution have left scars that even time cannot heal. The Missouri State Penitentiary is more than a relic of America's prison system. It is a place where shadows move, voices whisper, and the past refuses to let go. It remains one of the most haunted prisons in the United States, a chilling reminder of the violence and death that earned it its grim nickname, the bloodiest 47 acres in America. Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary, tucked deep in the rugged mountains of Petros, Tennessee, stands as a chilling monument to punishment and despair. Opened in the late 19th century, the prison was designed to be virtually inescapable, its stone walls rising imposingly against the mountainous terrain. Over the decades, it housed some of the state's most dangerous criminals, men who often met violent ends within its walls. The reputation of Brushy Mountain is one of brutality, confinement, and lingering suffering, a legacy that continues to echo long after the prison closed its doors. Visitors to the penitentiary frequently speak of an overwhelming sense of dread the moment they step onto the grounds. The mountain air feels heavier here, almost charged with the memories of decades of pain and fear. Even before entering the main cell blocks, some report hearing distant bangs and muffled shouts, sounds that seem impossibly real yet vanish when investigated. Cold drafts weave through the stone corridors, often brushing against visitors as if invisible hands are guiding or warning them. Inside the prison, the haunting intensifies. The long hallways and claustrophobic cells are known for frequent paranormal activity. Guests report hearing disembodied voices, some commanding prisoners to stand in line or obey orders, echoing the authoritative tones of guards who walked these halls over a century ago. Footsteps appear to follow visitors as they explore, heavy and deliberate, sometimes stopping abruptly when they turn to look. The clanging of cell doors, once a daily reminder of confinement, is still heard, even though the keys that once locked men away have long been removed. The solitary cells, in particular, are hotspots for supernatural activity. Inmates who spent days or weeks in isolation often succumbed to mental breakdowns, and it is believed that the anguish they endured remains embedded in the very stone. Visitors report sudden drops in temperature and a sensation of being watched or pressed against by invisible forces. Low, mournful moans and the occasional scream are said to echo from these cells, chilling the blood of even the most skeptical guests. Some of the most unnerving experiences occur in the common areas and the mess halls. Visitors often describe hearing laughter or shouting that seems to come from empty corners, sometimes accompanied by fleeting shadows darting across the walls. Apparitions in old-fashioned prison uniforms have been sighted pacing hallways, vanishing when approached, leaving only a cold, eerie silence behind. Even outside the main building, the grounds are not free from spectral presence. Former recreation areas, once the only respite for inmates, are reported to be sites of violent paranormal activity. Loud bangs, the sound of running footsteps, and shadowy figures moving among the trees give the impression that the prison's energy has extended beyond its walls. Some claim to feel an unseen hand on their shoulder, a force that seems to push them onward or warn them away. Paranormal investigators have been drawn to Brushy Mountain for decades, documenting a range of unsettling phenomena. Audio recordings often capture whispers, muffled cries, and commands from unseen guards. Flash photography sometimes reveals dark silhouettes or glowing eyes in hallways where no one is visible. Even skeptics find themselves unnerved, reporting a deep, oppressive sensation as they explore the historic corridors. Brushy Mountain State Penitentiary is more than just a relic of Tennessee's penal history. It is a place where suffering, despair, and violence have left a permanent mark. The echoes of the past footsteps, screams, the voices of men and guards long gone continue to linger, creating a chilling atmosphere that captivates visitors while warning them of the horrors that unfolded within. Every corridor, every cell, and every shadow serves as a reminder that the prison's dark legacy is far from buried, and that some spirits may never leave the mountains of Petros behind. The old Montana prison in Deer Lodge, Montana, looms as a grim monument to the harsh realities of 19th and 20th century incarceration. Built to house the state's most dangerous criminals, the prison witnessed decades of violence, riots, and tragic deaths. Its stone walls and iron-barred cells were silent witnesses to human suffering, fear, and desperation. And today, many believe that the energy of that torment lingers, giving the prison a reputation as one of the most haunted sites in the state. Visitors stepping onto the prison grounds are often struck immediately by a sense of unease. The air feels heavy, almost oppressive, as though the walls themselves carry the weight of decades of misery. Even before entering the main cell blocks, some report hearing faint shouts or chains dragging across the cold stone floors. Shadows seem to shift in the corners of their vision, and an unexplained chill often follows them down the hallways. Inside, the haunting intensifies. The long corridors and cramped cells are said to be alive with spectral activity. Phantom prisoners have been seen pacing the courtyards or disappearing suddenly into walls, leaving an eerie emptiness behind. Visitors describe hearing disembodied voices shouting orders, arguing, or calling names, echoes of the past that seem impossible yet unmistakably real. Even the most skeptical guests have reported feeling unseen hands brush against them, tugging at clothing or resting lightly on their shoulders, as if reminding them of the prison's dark history. The solitary cells, where inmates were held in isolation for days or weeks at a time, are particularly active. Many who were confined here suffered severe psychological trauma, and some never returned to their former mental state. Today, the cells radiate an unsettling energy, and visitors often feel sudden drops in temperature or a sense of suffocating despair. Low moans, occasional screams, and whispers that cannot be traced to any living source are frequently reported in these confined spaces. Those who linger too long sometimes feel an overwhelming pressure, as though the pain and loneliness of past inmates are pressing down on them. Even the courtyard, once the site of limited recreation, carries an unsettling presence. Tourists have described seeing figures dressed in old prison garb, walking aimlessly, sometimes stopping to stare, only to vanish when approached. The echoes of past conflicts, riots, and desperate attempts at escape seem to linger in the air, creating a palpable tension that can be felt by anyone exploring the grounds. Paranormal investigators who have spent extended time inside the prison frequently capture audio of faint whispers, footsteps, and shouting where no one else is present. Some have photographed shadowy shapes moving through the corridors, shapes that disappear when the camera is focused directly on them. Even the act of exploring the prison's hallways can be unnerving, as visitors often sense unseen eyes watching their every move. The old Montana prison is more than just an abandoned building. It is a vessel of history, pain, and lingering energy. Every corridor, cell, and courtyard tells a story of suffering and human tragedy, and the spirits of those who lived and died there are said to continue roaming the grounds. Tourists who enter do so with curiosity, but many leave with an uneasy understanding that the prison's dark past is far from gone. The heavy air, phantom sounds, and shadowy figures serve as a chilling reminder that some places, steeped in human suffering, never truly let go of the souls who endured them. For those who dare to explore its walls, the old Montana prison is both a window into the past and a haunting encounter with the restless spirits that linger in every shadow, every cell, and every stone of this historic site. The Wyoming Frontier Prison in Rawlins, Wyoming, stands as one of the most chilling reminders of America's harsh penal past. Opened in 1901, it served as the state's first official penitentiary and operated for nearly 80 years. Surrounded by the stark Wyoming plains and mountains, the prison quickly earned a reputation for brutality, despair, and death. It was here that hundreds of inmates lived in misery, many meeting their end by execution. Today, though the prison closed in 1981, it is far from silent. Visitors and paranormal investigators claim the dead still linger, haunting the stone walls, gallows, and execution chamber. Their restless spirits forever tied to the place where they suffered their last moments. From the beginning, Wyoming Frontier Prison was intended to strike fear into anyone who entered. Constructed of cold sandstone with high walls and barred windows, the building exuded hopelessness. Inmates endured bitter winters without adequate heat and sweltering summers that turned the cells into ovens. Disease spread easily, and violence among prisoners was a constant threat. Guards were harsh, punishments severe, and many prisoners never left alive. Between executions and natural deaths inside the walls, the prison became saturated with suffering, creating an atmosphere that many believe still lingers. Executions at the prison were grim spectacles. Hanging was the most common method early on. The prison gallows stood as a constant reminder of the fate awaiting those condemned. Inmates awaiting death could hear the creak of the wooden platform during test runs, an ominous sound that still echoes through the prison today, according to visitors. Later, the prison also utilized the firing squad, and eventually, the gas chamber, making it one of the few facilities in the United States to employ all three methods. Each execution left behind not only the memory of a life cut short, but also a spiritual scar on the prison itself. Stories of hauntings at the Wyoming Frontier Prison almost always return to the sites of execution. In the old gallows room, visitors often describe hearing phantom footsteps pacing above them, as though someone is walking their final path before the drop. The sound of the trapdoor creaking open has been reported countless times, even though the mechanism no longer functions. Some claim to feel sudden cold drafts wrapping around them, like unseen hands brushing against their skin, while others hear whispers begging for release. These disembodied voices are said to belong to prisoners who never found peace after their deaths. The firing squad area carries its own disturbing energy. Shadows are seen darting across the walls, and muffled gunshots echo faintly when no one else is present. Paranormal investigators have captured electronic voice phenomena, strange recordings of voices pleading for help or crying out in pain. The gas chamber, introduced in the mid-20th century, is one of the most unsettling locations in the prison. Visitors often feel overwhelming dread as soon as they step inside, describing it as though the air itself becomes heavy and suffocating. Some even claim to hear the hissing of phantom gas and the choking sounds of unseen prisoners reliving their final moments. Beyond the execution sites, the entire prison is said to be alive with ghostly activity. In the long, narrow cell blocks, footsteps echo when no one is walking. Cell doors slam shut with a deafening clang, though the blocks are empty. Guides leading tours have reported feeling watched, as if dozens of unseen eyes followed them from the shadows. Tourists sometimes describe feeling hands grab at their clothing or tug at their hair, phantom touches that leave them shaken. Others have seen apparitions of men in ragged prison uniforms, lingering in the courtyard or peering from behind bars before vanishing into thin air. The solitary confinement cells are among the most terrifying parts of the prison. Inmates once spent weeks in isolation in these tiny, dark rooms, and many descended into madness. Today, the cells still radiate despair. Visitors describe overwhelming feelings of panic, nausea, or sadness upon entering. Some hear faint cries and screams, while others experience sudden physical sensations, sharp pains, the feeling of being shoved, or the icy grip of a hand on their shoulder. Paranormal groups consider the solitary block one of the prison's most active hotspots, a place where the energy of human suffering never dissipated. Even the prison yard is not free from spectral presences. Witnesses have seen shadowy figures pacing back and forth across the cracked ground, as though reenacting daily routines from long ago. The sound of chains dragging across the dirt has been reported, accompanied by the ghostly murmurs of prisoners talking among themselves. At night, some have seen glowing figures near the walls, only for them to vanish when approached. For many who tours the Wyoming frontier prison today, the experience is far more than a history lesson. It is a brush with the lingering echoes of the past, a confrontation with the restless dead who refuse to leave. The prison has become a place where history and haunting are inseparably entwined. Each creak of the gallows, each whisper in the cell block, each chilling touch on the skin reminds visitors that the suffering and fear experienced here have left an indelible mark. The Wyoming frontier prison remains one of the most haunted sites in the American West. It is a monument to human cruelty, punishment, and death, but also to the strange persistence of the spirit. Those who enter its gates today may leave with more than just a story of the past. They may carry with them the memory of voices that still echo in the silence, of unseen presences that refuse to be forgotten, and of a prison that continues to hold its inmates long after death. The Lorton Reformatory in Lorton, Virginia, stands as one of the most chilling remnants of America's correctional past. Once a massive prison complex meant to reform rather than punish, its sprawling grounds and labyrinth of cell blocks now sit in eerie silence. Closed in 2001, after decades of operation, the prison still draws visitors, historians, and paranormal investigators alike. They do not come for its architectural beauty or its history alone, but for the lingering presence of something unseen. Shadows move where no living soul should walk. Voices whisper from the darkness. The restless echoes of its violent past refuse to fade. The reformatory was built in 1910 as part of a progressive movement in corrections. Unlike the cold and towering Gothic prisons of the 19th century, Lorton was intended to give prisoners a chance at rehabilitation. They worked on farms, learned trades, and contributed to the upkeep of the community. But as the decades passed, the prison grew overcrowded, dangerous, and violent. Escapes were frequent, riots broke out, and brutality between guards and inmates became part of daily life. By the time it was shuttered, Lorton had gained a reputation for being as unforgiving and dangerous as any of the nation's most notorious penitentiaries. Walking through the abandoned complex today, the air feels unnervingly heavy. The tunnels that once connected different wings are cloaked in darkness, and many visitors report the sensation of being followed by unseen figures. Paranormal teams exploring these underground corridors have captured strange anomalies on their equipment, unexplained temperature drops, disembodied voices on digital recorders, and even fleeting apparitions that seem to vanish into the walls. Shadowy figures have been spotted darting just out of sight, as though the inmates are still moving through the prison in an endless routine, unaware that their sentences ended decades ago. The soundscape of Lorton is particularly disturbing. Many who enter the cell blocks describe hearing the loud clanging of steel doors slamming shut. Even though the doors are rusted open and immovable, others recount muffled cries echoing down the halls, faint but unmistakable, as if the walls themselves have absorbed the pain of those once trapped inside. A recurring phenomenon is the soft dragging of chains across the floor, heard in multiple parts of the prison. Some believe this is the residual energy of shackled prisoners being led through the corridors, forever repeating their march toward punishment or confinement. One of the most active areas is the solitary confinement block, where prisoners endured long stretches of isolation in cramped, airless cells. Visitors who step inside often describe an overwhelming sense of dread, accompanied by the physical sensation of being touched or grabbed by unseen hands. The feeling is so strong that some leave in a panic, convinced that they are not alone. Paranormal investigators have reported bursts of electronic interference in these cells. their devices shutting off or batteries draining in an instant, as though the energy of the place is being siphoned away. In the prison yard, where inmates once exercised under the watchful eyes of guards, some claim to see ghostly figures pacing along the fences, endlessly walking the same paths worn down over decades. Others say they hear phantom conversations, men talking in low, urgent tones, though no one is nearby. The spirits seem to replay fragments of their past lives, echoes of routine and desperation woven into the fabric of the grounds. Perhaps the most unsettling encounters occur in the administrative and guard areas. Several visitors have reported hearing authoritative voices barking orders, commands shouted with a tone so sharp it freezes them in place. When they turn to look, the hallways are empty. Some speculate that these are the voices of long-dead guards, still enforcing rules on prisoners who never truly left. The line between the living and the dead seems blurred at Lorton, where the energy of conflict still lingers. Though the prison officially closed its doors over 2 decades ago, it has refused to rest quietly. Locals avoid the grounds after dark, wary of the unsettling atmosphere. Paranormal tours and investigations continue to document strange occurrences, and each new story adds to the legend. Some believe that the suffering of thousands of inmates left an indelible mark on the land, a psychic scar that time cannot erase. Others suggest that certain spirits remain bound here, unable to move on, trapped in the cycles of punishment and despair that defined their lives. The Lorton Reformatory may be abandoned, but it is far from empty. Its cells still echo with the cries of the forgotten. Its tunnels remain filled with shifting shadows, and its halls resound with the faint metallic clamor of a prison that refuses to die. For those who dare to step inside, it offers not just a glimpse into the harsh realities of America's penal history, but a chilling encounter with the restless dead who continue to haunt its decaying corridors. Kingston Penitentiary, located on the shores of Lake Ontario in Kingston, Ontario, is one of Canada's most infamous prisons. Opened in 1835 and operating until its closure in 2013. The massive stone fortress became a place where some of the country's most notorious criminals were confined. It was a world unto itself, a place of punishment, discipline, and often cruelty. Behind its looming limestone walls, countless men endured years of hardship, and some met violent ends. Even though the prison has been closed for over a decade, many believe it has never truly emptied. Visitors, staff, and paranormal investigators alike claim the prison is alive with the restless voices of those who once lived and sometimes died within its walls. The architecture of Kingston Penitentiary alone inspires unease. Its Gothic design, cold limestone blocks, and rows of barred windows give it the appearance of a fortress more than a place of reform. The thick walls echo with every sound, amplifying footsteps and whispers until they seem to follow you. Those who have walked the long corridors describe an unnatural chill in the air, as though the very stones retain the memories of suffering etched into them by nearly 2 centuries of confinement. The heavy iron doors, now rusting, still bear the scratches and gouges left by desperate prisoners who longed for freedom. Reports of paranormal activity began long before the prison closed. Guards in the mid-20th century would whisper about hearing voices when alone on their rounds. Many described seeing strange lights flickering down dark corridors, even when there was no electricity in those areas. Some recounted hearing phantom screams echoing through the cell blocks at night, even when every inmate was accounted for. Others refused to patrol certain areas alone, especially the older wings of the prison, where the sense of being watched was overwhelming. One of the most haunted areas of Kingston Penitentiary is said to be the solitary confinement wing. Known as the Hole, this was a place where inmates were locked in isolation for days, weeks, or even months at a time. Prisoners here endured near total darkness, silence, and neglect. Many emerged broken, both mentally and physically, and some never left alive. Today, visitors who stand in these cells often report hearing faint cries and muffled voices, as though the walls themselves are still carrying the agony of those left behind. Paranormal investigators who have recorded audio in the solitary wing often capture unexplained sounds, whispers, chains dragging, or the distant cries of men begging for release. Executions were never officially carried out within Kingston Penitentiary, but violence was a constant presence. Stabbings, riots, and murders between inmates claimed many lives. Guards, too, were not always safe. The energy of these violent encounters seems to linger. Tour guides have reported shadowy figures darting across cell block hallways, only to vanish when approached. Some describe hearing sudden bursts of yelling, like a fight breaking out, only to find nothing but silence when they investigate. Perhaps one of the most chilling encounters involves the Central Dome, a massive hub where guards once kept watch over multiple blocks. Visitors report seeing figures standing on the catwalks above, staring down at them. When approached, these figures dissolve into thin air. Others have heard the echo of footsteps circling the dome, long after the building has been closed for the night. Some even claim to feel a sharp tug on their clothing, as though unseen hands are reaching out from the past. Psychics who have visited Kingston Penitentiary describe the building as alive with energy. They sense a mixture of fear, rage, and sorrow that has seeped into the very foundation. Many spirits, they say, are trapped in cycles of confusion, replaying the same moments of suffering over and over. For some, it is the despair of solitary confinement. For others, it is the chaos of sudden death. The sheer number of people who pass through Kingston during its 178 years of operation means countless untold stories remain embedded within its walls. And some of those stories refuse to rest quietly. Even casual visitors feel the weight of the place. Tourists walking the grounds often describe hearing faint voices calling from empty cells. Others hear doors slamming shut when no one is nearby. The echo of chains dragging across the floor is one of the most commonly reported sounds. And many insist they have seen ghostly figures pacing the courtyards, as if still waiting for a chance to escape. Some leave the tours visibly shaken, insisting that the air inside feels heavy, oppressive, as if the prison itself is breathing. What makes Kingston Penitentiary so haunting is not just the violence and despair that filled its walls, but the way its energy continues to affect those who enter. Unlike ruins left to decay, Kingston remains intact. Its massive walls and cells preserved for tours. It is a place where the past feels present, where history refuses to stay silent. The spirits said to linger here are not content to fade away. They remind every visitor that this was a place of pain, fear, and punishment. For many, Kingston Penitentiary is more than just a historic landmark. It is a place where the line between the living and the dead blurs. Strange lights flicker in the darkness. Voices whisper in the silence. Phantom screams pierce the night. Those who step inside its gates often leave with the unsettling feeling that they were never truly alone. The prison, though empty of living inmates, remains a world still populated by shadows, echoes, and restless souls trapped between two worlds, forever bound to the fortress that defined their existence. The old Idaho State Penitentiary in Boise stands as a relic of both punishment and pain. A place where stone walls once confined some of the most dangerous criminals in the American Northwest. Operating from 1872 until 1973, the prison witnessed executions, bloody riots, and daring escapes, leaving behind a legacy steeped in suffering. Its sandstone walls, quarried by inmates themselves, absorbed over a century of anguish and fear. Today, though long closed, the penitentiary seems to live on with echoes of the past. A place where restless spirits linger in the cold corridors and vacant cells. From the moment visitors step through the rusted gates, the atmosphere is heavy, almost suffocating, as if the building itself breathes with the memories of those who never left. The stories told by guests and paranormal investigators suggest that the old Idaho Penitentiary has become a prison for the dead as much as it was for the living. Executions were carried out here, most often by hanging. The gallows, once used to end lives in front of grim audiences, are now silent but not entirely still. Visitors walking through the old execution room often report the unmistakable creak of the rope swinging from the beam, even though nothing hangs there anymore. Some have claimed to hear the faint sound of a man choking, gasping for air, followed by an eerie silence that seems to press down on everyone present. It is as though the condemned are forced to relive their final moments over and over, their suffering echoing in the air. The prison's violent history did not stop with executions. In 1971, and again in 1973, riots erupted within the walls. Inmates, desperate for better living conditions and driven by rage, set fires and battled guards. The flames scorched parts of the prison, leaving behind charred scars on the walls that still remain. Some believe the energy of those chaotic days is trapped in the building. Visitors often describe hearing phantom shouts, panicked footsteps running through the corridors, and the distant crackle of fire when the night is perfectly quiet. Escapes were another bloody part of the prison's story. Some inmates attempted daring breakouts, only to meet violent ends. Guards were killed, prisoners were shot, and blood was spilled in the prison yard. Those who walk near the old towers sometimes claim to see shadowy figures pacing the perimeter. No matter how many years have passed, the memory of violence seems woven into the fabric of the penitentiary. Perhaps the most chilling experiences come from the solitary confinement cells, known as Siberia by the inmates. These underground cells were places of complete darkness and isolation. Prisoners could be kept inside for weeks, with no light, no sound, and little contact with the outside world. The psychological toll was devastating, driving many to madness. Even today, visitors who step inside the solitary cells describe an overwhelming sense of dread. Some report feeling as though invisible hands are pressing on their chest, making it difficult to breathe. Others say the silence is broken by whispers that seem to come from nowhere, voices murmuring just beyond comprehension. Paranormal investigators have documented sudden drops in temperature within these cells, along with unexplainable shadows moving against the walls. Some claim that cameras malfunction, batteries drain, and electronic equipment refuses to work in this part of the prison. It is as if whatever lingers there resists being recorded, preferring to remain in darkness. Women who visit often describe being shoved or scratched by unseen forces, sometimes leaving visible marks on their skin. Others have heard chains dragging across the stone floor, even when the hallways are empty. One of the most chilling stories comes from a visitor who claimed to see a tall, shadowy figure in the doorway of a cell. When they turned to leave, the figure rushed forward and vanished before making contact. Not all of the spirits seem aggressive, however. Some appear lost, confused, or trapped in endless routines. A few guests claim to have seen full apparitions of men in prison uniforms, quietly sitting on bunks or leaning against the cold stone walls. When approached, the figures fade away, as though they were never there at all. The old Idaho Penitentiary is now a historic site, drawing thousands of visitors every year who come to learn about its past or to encounter its lingering residents. The tours during the day reveal the brutal history of prison life, but at night, the energy shifts into something much darker. Paranormal tours often leave guests shaken, with many swearing they will never return. It is said that prisons are places of unfinished business, where anger, fear, and despair seep into the very walls. The old Idaho State Penitentiary embodies this idea perfectly. More than a century of suffering remains etched into the stone, creating an environment where time feels distorted and the line between the living and the dead blurs. Today, as the sun sets and the shadows stretch long across the yard, the prison seems to awaken. The air grows colder, the silence more oppressive, and the feeling of being watched impossible to ignore. Some say the souls of the condemned and forgotten still wander the blocks, searching for freedom they never found in life. For those who dare to walk its halls after dark, the old Idaho Penitentiary offers more than a history lesson. It offers a chilling reminder that some prisons never truly close. The Atlanta Federal Penitentiary looms on the southern horizon like a fortress of stone and steel, a structure that has earned its place in the history of America's most notorious prisons. Opened in 1902, This massive complex was built to house some of the country's most dangerous and high-profile criminals, designed to intimidate and control. It quickly developed a reputation for its strict discipline and the violence that simmered within its walls. Yet even beyond the stories of riots, escapes, and brutality, the prison carries a darker legacy. Whispers of strange occurrences, ghostly voices, and chilling apparitions suggest that the Atlanta Penitentiary is not only a place of the living, but one haunted by the restless dead. From its earliest years, life inside the penitentiary was harsh. The institution was designed to instill obedience through isolation and control. Yet its overcrowding and violent inmate population often led to explosive confrontations. Over the decades, riots erupted, some turning deadly. One of the most infamous came in 1987, when Cuban inmates protesting their indefinite detention staged a violent uprising that lasted for 11 days. Fires burned, gunshots echoed, and dozens were injured. The memory of this event still lingers in the halls, as if the building itself absorbed the chaos and pain. Guards and staff who patrol the grounds at night often claim to hear phantom echoes of that riot shout, the crackle of fire, and the sound of pounding footsteps rushing past, even when the corridors are empty. Shadowy figures are among the most commonly reported phenomena at the penitentiary. Guards making their rounds after dark often describe seeing fleeting movements in the corner of their vision. Human-shaped shadows gliding along the walls, only to vanish when confronted directly. Some claim the figures follow them, appearing just out of reach, as though unseen inmates are still wandering the halls, serving sentences that never ended. These apparitions are not limited to staff. Inmates too have spoken of the strange presence of figures in their cells or drifting across the prison yard during the quietest hours of the night. The most unsettling experiences often involve voices. Guards have reported hearing their names whispered from empty corridors, the disembodied words spoken so close they could feel the breath on their necks. Others recall hearing entire conversations low, indistinct murmurs like prisoners plotting in secret tonally to discover that every nearby cell was unoccupied. Even more chilling are the cries and screams that sometimes ring out in the dead of night, sounds so real that emergency checks are conducted, yet no living soul is found responsible. These voices seem to echo from the past, perhaps belonging to men who met violent ends within the prison's walls. Prisoners have long spoken of the weight of dread that seems to cling to certain areas. Some claim their cells feel colder than the rest of the block, as if something unseen is watching them. A few even describe being woken in the night by a heavy pressure on their chest, as though pinned down by invisible hands. For men already living in fear and isolation, these encounters with the supernatural only add another layer of torment. In the solitude of the penitentiary, the line between reality and haunting often blurs. The penitentiary's execution history is also thought to contribute to its haunted reputation. While not a site of frequent state executions like some prisons, death still found many inmates here through violence, suicide, and murder. The weight of these deaths lingers, an imprint of suffering that many believe fuels the spectral activity. In some corridors, visitors report sudden chills, a drop in temperature so sharp it feels unnatural, as if the walls themselves exhale the cold breath of those who perished. Employees have shared countless stories over the years, often with a mixture of fear and resignation. One guard recalled locking down a wing for the night, only to hear the unmistakable sound of footsteps pacing back and forth down the empty hall. Another swore he saw the outline of a man standing at the far end of the corridor, watching him in silence, yet no one was ever found. Even hardened staff members admit that certain parts of the prison are avoided whenever possible, especially after nightfall. Though still an active federal facility, the Atlanta Penitentiary has gained a reputation that reaches beyond its walls. Paranormal investigators, though rarely permitted access, often speculate that the energy of so many violent incidents and untimely deaths could leave a lasting spiritual mark. Stories from both inmates and guards circulate widely, cementing the prison's status as not just a place of confinement, but a place where the past refuses to rest. The Atlanta Federal Penitentiary remains a functioning institution, its cells still filled with those society deems dangerous. Yet beneath its surface lies another reality, one that cannot be documented on paper or contained behind locked doors. The shadows that stalk the halls, the voices that call out in the night, and the lingering presence of the dead all suggest that this prison holds more than just the living. It holds the echoes of every scream, every violent act, and every lost soul trapped within its walls. For those who work or serve time there, it is a chilling reminder that the penitentiary is not only a place of punishment, it is a place where the past continues to haunt the present. Folsom State Prison, one of the most infamous correctional facilities in the United States, has a history steeped in violence, misery, and despair. Opened in 1880, it was California's second state prison, built to relieve overcrowding at San Quentin. Surrounded by thick granite walls and razor wire, the prison quickly developed a reputation as a place where hope went to die, housing hardened criminals, gang members, and those considered too dangerous for other institutions. Folsom became synonymous with punishment and unforgiving discipline. But long after the riots, executions, and daily brutality ceased for many of its inhabitants, the echoes of the past seem unwilling to leave. The prison has become a hotbed for chilling paranormal activity, where the cries of the dead continue to seep into the living world. Many people know Folsom because of Johnny Cash's famous prison concerts, which immortalized its name and song. Yet behind the music and cultural lore is a darker legacy. Executions were once carried out within its walls, with hangings and later the gas chamber bringing an end to many lives. Violence was a constant, with riots, stabbings, and escapes marking the prison's bloody history. The cumulative energy of so much pain and death has left behind an imprint, and visitors today claim the facility feels alive with restless spirits. One of the most frequently reported hauntings centers around the old execution chamber. Though no longer in use, the room still carries the atmosphere of finality. Visitors have claimed to hear phantom cries echoing in the chamber, as if the last desperate pleas of condemned inmates still reverberate through time. Some describe a suffocating heaviness settling over them as they step inside, a weight that presses against the chest and makes breathing difficult. Shadows are often spotted moving across the walls when the room is otherwise empty, and some witnesses say they feel a presence standing directly behind them, only to turn and find no one there. The cell blocks themselves are no less haunted. Correctional officers and visitors alike have reported seeing shadowy figures gliding between the cells, sometimes pausing to watch before vanishing into the dark. These apparitions are often described as tall and gaunt, their outlines flickering like smoke. On quiet nights, footsteps echo along the corridors, pacing endlessly as if inmates from another time are still patrolling the tiers. What unsettles most people is the feeling that these spirits are not merely residual echoes, but intelligent presences as aware of the living, and at times trying to make contact. Some of the strangest reports involve music, a reminder of Johnny Cash's performance, but with an eerie twist. Multiple visitors have described hearing the faint sound of a harmonica playing somewhere in the distance, drifting through the corridors. The notes are often slow, melancholy, and filled with a sense of longing. Yet when the sound is followed, it fades into silence, leaving no trace of its source. Some speculate that it may be tied to an inmate who once played the harmonica during his time behind bars, his soul forever trapped within the prison's walls. The solitary confinement cells are another place where people feel the weight of the supernatural. Those who step inside often describe overwhelming dread, as though they are being consumed by the despair of countless men who once languished there. Many claim to feel sudden drops in temperature, the hairs on their arms standing on end as if watched by unseen eyes. Some even report being shoved or touched by unseen hands, the aggression mirroring the violence that once defined life in Folsom. Guards themselves have not been immune to the strange phenomena. Former officers have admitted to hearing voices whispering their names during night shifts, the words carried softly yet distinctly through empty corridors. Others have witnessed doors closing by themselves, or have seen objects move as if tugged by invisible forces. A few even walked away from their posts, unable to cope with the relentless feeling that something was stalking them in the shadows. Paranormal investigators who have entered the prison describe it as one of the most active sites they have ever encountered. Electronic voice phenomena recordings capture whispers and cries, sometimes in response to questions. Temperature readings fluctuate wildly, and electromagnetic sensors spike in areas where no electronic interference should exist. Many leave convinced that the spirits of Folsom are not at rest, bound to the place where they suffered, fought, and died. To walk through Folsom is to step into a world suspended between past and present. The granite walls do not simply contain history, they radiate it, vibrating with the sorrow and rage of generations of inmates. It is a place where music and violence have collided, where death has left a permanent scar, and where the living cannot escape the gaze of the dead. Folsom State Prison stands as more than just a relic of America's penal system. It is a monument to despair, violence, and survival, where the spirits of the past refuse to fade quietly into memory. Cries from the execution chamber, shadowy inmates wandering the cell blocks, and the haunting strains of ghostly harmonica music serve as reminders that some souls remain trapped, forever bound to the prison they could never leave in life. For those who dare to visit, the line between the living and the dead feels dangerously thin, and every echo in the halls carries with it the weight of a ghostly presence lingering just beyond sight. The Yuma Territorial Prison, perched above the Colorado River in the blistering Arizona desert, is remembered as one of the most feared prisons of the Old West, nicknamed the Hellhole of the West. It housed some of the region's most notorious criminals from its opening in 1876 until its closure in 1909. Though its stone walls and iron bars have long ceased to contain the living, many believe that the souls of those who suffered within them have never left. Visitors who walk through its remains often describe it not as a museum, but as a place still alive with voices from another time, built by the very inmates who would be confined within it. The Yuma Territorial Prison was a symbol of harsh justice in the unforgiving desert. Prisoners endured unbearable conditions, searing heat during the day, bitter cold at night, and a constant assault of sand and dust. The cells were small, dark, and cramped, with little ventilation. Punishment was severe, and for many, survival was uncertain. Yet despite its reputation, the prison was considered advanced for its era. It had running water, electricity, and even a library, luxuries rare in the frontier. But these comforts could not mask the misery of confinement, nor erase the suffering etched into its stone walls. Executions and violent deaths cast a shadow over the prison's history. The infamous dark cell, a pitch-black dungeon carved into the rock, was reserved for the most disobedient inmates. Prisoners thrown into this isolation chamber often emerged broken, if they emerged at all. Some never left alive, and it is said their spirits linger, bound forever to the place of their torment. Visitors who step into the dark cell today report feeling overwhelming dread, as though unseen eyes are watching. Some claim to hear soft moans, chains dragging, or even the faint scratch of fingernails against stone. Many leave the cell quickly, unable to withstand the oppressive atmosphere. The desert itself adds to the haunting. Even in the sweltering heat, visitors often report sudden chills as they move through the prison grounds. Guides and tourists alike have spoken of cold spots forming in the open yard, where temperatures should be scorching. Some describe feeling an invisible hand brush against their arm, or hearing the rattle of chains when no one else is near. The sound of footsteps pacing in empty cells is another common report, as if former inmates still walk the narrow spaces, endlessly trapped in their routines. Phantom figures have also been seen within the ruins. Shadowy inmates are said to appear behind bars or drift across doorways, vanishing when approached. Tourists have captured strange forms on their cameras, figures in striped prison uniforms, or hazy shapes lingering in the cell blocks. One frequently mentioned apparition is that of a woman dressed in black, believed to be the grieving spirit of a prisoner's wife who died while visiting. Witnesses claim to see her wandering the prison yard at dusk, her face hidden beneath a veil. Whispers are perhaps the most chilling phenomenon. Numerous visitors have reported hearing faint voices carried through the air, some pleading, some crying, others mumbling incoherently. On quiet nights, the prison seems to come alive with echoes of the past. The clang of cell doors, the sharp orders of guards, and the low, desperate prayers of men facing punishment. Paranormal investigators, who have recorded inside the prison, have captured strange audio disembodied voices saying "help me," or distant screams when the grounds were empty. The stories extend beyond the cells. In the old hospital wing, visitors often feel uneasy, as if surrounded by unseen presences. Some claim to hear the labored breathing of patients, or the echo of stretchers being wheeled across the floor. The cemetery outside the walls, where hundreds of prisoners were buried in unmarked graves, is equally unnerving. The restless dead are said to rise at night, their shadows drifting across the desert ground. Those who dare to walk near the cemetery after dark often report glowing lights hovering over the graves, or the sound of whispered prayers carried by the wind. Despite its dark history, the Yuma Territorial Prison has become one of Arizona's most popular historical sites. Yet for many who visit, it is far more than a relic of the past. The building seems infused with the pain, anger, and despair of those who once lived and died there. Paranormal investigators frequently rank it among the most haunted locations in the Southwest, and countless tourists leave convinced they have encountered something beyond explanation. The hellhole of the West earned its name through decades of suffering, and that suffering seems to linger in every corridor, every stone, every shadow that stretches across the prison walls. Whether it is the restless spirits of inmates, the echoes of lives cut short, or simply the weight of history pressing down, Yuma Territorial Prison continues to unnerve and fascinate all who enter. It stands as a chilling reminder that while the desert may swallow the living, the dead often find ways to remain. The old Charleston Jail in Charleston, South Carolina, stands as one of the city's most chilling landmarks, its weathered walls and barred windows holding centuries of dark history. Built in 1802, the jail served as the primary holding place for the city's most notorious criminals, including pirates, murderers, and Civil War prisoners. Its fortress-like structure, complete with high stone walls and narrow corridors, was designed not only to contain its inmates, but to instill fear in anyone who passed through its gates. For nearly 150 years, it bore witness to brutality, suffering, and countless deaths. Today, though it closed in 1939, many believe the spirits of those who perished within its walls never left, their cries still echoing through the damp and decaying chambers. The jail's history is stained with violence. During the 19th century, it housed high-profile criminals, including the infamous Lavinia Fisher, often called America's first female serial killer. She and her husband, John, were imprisoned here before their execution in 1820. According to legend, Lavinia went to her hanging defiantly, wearing her wedding dress, and shouted a curse upon Charleston before the trapdoor opened beneath her feet. Many visitors and paranormal investigators claim her spirit still roams the halls of the old jail, sometimes appearing as a shadowy woman in white, her face obscured but her presence undeniable. Some even report hearing a woman's laughter, echoing faintly from the old execution grounds, as if mocking the fate that was meant to silence her. The old Charleston jail also became a temporary prison during the Civil War, when captured Union soldiers and Confederate deserters were crammed into its overcrowded cells. Conditions were appalling. Starvation, disease, and neglect claimed many lives. Some prisoners scratched desperate messages into the walls, carvings that can still be seen today. Tour guides and ghost hunters often describe feeling overwhelming waves of despair in these cells, as though the agony of those who suffered there still lingers in the very stones. Visitors have reported sudden drops in temperature, unexplained dizziness, and even the sensation of being watched, despite the rooms being completely empty. Perhaps the most disturbing hauntings come from the jail's dungeon-like basement, where prisoners endured the harshest punishments. Shackled in isolation, many lost their minds before their bodies gave out. Reports of paranormal activity here are among the most terrifying. Investigators have captured disembodied screams on audio recorders, voices begging for help, and the distinct sound of chains dragging across the stone floor. Some who have dared to enter alone describe feeling invisible hands brush against their shoulders or grip their arms tightly, leaving them shaken and unwilling to return. Shadowy figures are also commonly sighted within the jail. Witnesses claim to see dark silhouettes pacing behind barred windows, as if prisoners are still standing watch over the city they once longed to escape. Others have seen full apparitions of men in tattered prison uniforms, only to vanish when approached. Guards who worked during the jail's operational years occasionally spoke of hearing footsteps in empty hallways, or keys jingling as though an unseen warden still made his nightly rounds. Modern-day visitors who tour the site often come away with chilling personal experiences. Some recount hearing faint whispers that seem to follow them from room to room, voices too indistinct to understand but impossible to ignore. Others describe hearing blood-curdling screams from the upper levels, only to find the floors deserted. Cameras and cell phones frequently malfunction inside, batteries draining at impossible speeds, as though some unseen force is feeding on the energy. Paranormal investigators have captured strange anomalies on film, including glowing orbs and misty shapes that seem to hover just out of reach. The jail's imposing facade alone has an unsettling effect. Standing before its weathered stone exterior, many describe an unshakable heaviness, a sense that the building itself is alive with memories of torment. Even in broad daylight, the barred windows seem to stare outward like dark, unblinking eyes, daring passers-by to come closer. At night, the atmosphere intensifies, the creak of shifting wood, the rustle of unseen movement, and the occasional flicker of light in windows where no electricity flows, all add to its terrifying reputation. One of the most frequently told stories involves groups of visitors walking through the narrow corridors, only to feel an icy chill sweep through the crowd. Despite Charleston's often sweltering heat, some have felt themselves shoved or pulled without warning, while others have heard footsteps following close behind, though no one was there. Tour guides report guests suddenly panicking and demanding to leave the building immediately, unable to shake the feeling that something unseen was closing in on them. The old Charleston jail remains a place where the line between history and haunting blurs, its legacy as a holding ground for pirates, criminals, and war prisoners left behind a residue of anguish that refuses to be erased. Every scream, every shadow, every whisper reported by visitors seems to breathe life into the stories of those who died within its walls. The building may no longer serve its grim purpose, but it is far from empty. Those who enter often leave with the haunting certainty that the spirits of the old jail are still very much awake, restless and unwilling to let their stories be forgotten. Charleston is a city steeped in history, but the old jail remains one of its darkest relics. Its walls are thick with the weight of centuries of suffering, and its halls echo with the memories of the damned. For those who seek a glimpse into the supernatural or simply wish to feel the presence of the past, the old Charleston jail offers both. But for many who walk its corridors, the experience lingers long after they've left, a chilling reminder that some places are forever haunted. San Quentin State Prison, standing on the shores of the San Francisco Bay in San Rafael, California, is a name heavy with history and dread. Opened in 1852, it is the oldest prison in the state and one of the most infamous in America. Its reputation has been built not only on its notorious inmates and violent past, but also on the countless executions carried out within its walls. More than 700 men were put to death here over the decades, many in the gas chamber installed in the mid-20th century. With such a long and tragic history, it is little wonder that San Quentin has developed a reputation for being one of the most haunted prisons in the United States. Guards, staff, and even visitors have all shared chilling accounts of paranormal encounters that suggest the restless souls of former inmates still walk the prison grounds. The architecture itself sets the mood for unease. Towering walls, lined with watchtowers, enclose a sprawling compound of cells, exercise yards, and execution chambers. The air feels heavy with tension, as though the stories of suffering and violence have seeped into the very stones. San Quentin has housed some of the most infamous criminals in American history, men whose crimes shocked the nation. It has also witnessed riots, stabbings, and countless acts of despair from inmates who saw no way out of their grim existence. Many guards who have worked within its walls claim that the energy of so much death and anguish still lingers. One of the most common reports comes from the area near the old execution chamber. Before California ended the use of the gas chamber in the 1990s, hundreds of inmates met their end within those walls. Today, staff claim they sometimes hear the faint sounds of gas hissing or the echo of terrified screams. Long after the chamber was decommissioned, some have even reported the overpowering smell of bitter almonds, the telltale scent of cyanide gas hanging in the air, with no logical explanation. At times, guards passing by swear they hear voices murmuring prayers or cries for mercy, chilling remnants of final moments replaying endlessly. The cell blocks themselves are not free from activity. Guards patrolling at night have often reported phantom footsteps echoing in the corridors, even when no one else was around. Some describe hearing the clank of cell doors slamming shut or the jingle of unseen keys, as though ghostly wardens still walk their nightly rounds. One particularly unsettling account tells of a guard who felt a sudden shove from behind while walking through a darkened hallway. When he turned around, he found himself completely alone, yet the pressure had been so strong, it nearly knocked him off balance. Others speak of icy drafts sweeping through sealed areas, sending shivers down their spines. Despite the mild California climate, there are also reports of full apparitions. Several guards and maintenance workers have claimed to see shadowy figures dressed in old prison uniforms, moving silently along the tiers. These figures often vanish as soon as they are approached, dissolving into thin air before the startled witnesses. In one case, a worker repairing lights in a corridor caught sight of a man standing at the far end, staring intently. Thinking it was another staff member, he called out, but the figure turned and walked straight through the barred door, disappearing without a sound. Perhaps most chilling are the stories involving cell blocks that house the prison's death row inmate. Some former guards have described feeling overwhelming dread when entering these areas, as though the walls themselves radiated despair. Visitors on tours sometimes report the sensation of being watched, even when the block is empty. A few have even claimed to hear whispers calling their names, the disembodied voices echoing around them. Paranormal investigators who have visited the prison speak of sudden drops in temperature, unexplained equipment malfunctions, and recordings of faint voices pleading for release. The yard and surrounding grounds also seem to carry their own energy. During nighttime patrols, guards have spotted dark silhouettes moving across the yard, figures too solid to be dismissed as tricks of the light, yet too elusive to be caught. Dogs, used for security, have been known to react violently in certain areas, barking at unseen threats and refusing to proceed. Some guards even refuse to walk those areas alone after dark, claiming that the oppressive feeling is simply too much to bear. The stories are not limited to guards and staff. Former inmates have also spoken of the strange atmosphere within San Quentin. Some describe nights when the prison would fall into unnatural silence, broken only by faint cries or muttering voices with no source. Others claim to wake suddenly in the night to see shadowy figures standing at the foot of their beds, watching silently before fading into the darkness. These experiences, they said, were often more terrifying than any real threat from other inmates. San Quentin remains an active prison, housing thousands of inmates and continuing to be a site of punishment and reform. Yet, beneath its official role, there lies another story, a story of spirits that refuse to leave, of voices trapped in endless echoes of their suffering. For many who have worked there, the haunting presence of the past is undeniable. They believe that the energy of death and despair has stained the very foundations of the prison, ensuring that San Quentin will never be free from its ghosts. The La Tuna Federal Correctional Institution in Anthony, Texas, may not be as infamous as some of America's larger and more historic prisons, but its reputation for the paranormal is chilling enough to rival them. Sitting on the edge of the vast and unforgiving Chawan Desert, the facility has long been surrounded by whispers of strange happenings, stories told by guards, staff, and the few outsiders allowed close enough to feel the oppressive energy that hangs over the grounds. What makes La Tuna especially unsettling is that, even though it remains an operational prison, its legends are wrapped in shadows, where phantom prisoners supposedly linger, and ghostly cries echo across the barren landscape. The desert itself plays a role in amplifying the prison's eerie presence. At night, the wind whistles through the rocky canyons and dry brush, carrying sounds that can easily be mistaken for voices. But those who work within La Tuna are adamant that the noises aren't simply tricks of the winds. Guards have reported hearing screams, raw, desperate, and full of pain coming from empty corridors or from beyond the prison walls where no living soul should be. Others describe hearing chains dragging across the concrete floors, though no inmate is near. The most unsettling accounts, however, come from those who claim to have seen glowing eyes staring out from the desert darkness, watching them from just beyond the perimeter fences. For many, the legend of the glowing eyes is the most terrifying of all the prison's ghostly phenomena. According to stories passed between guards, these apparitions aren't fleeting tricks of the imagination. Several officers on night watch claim to have locked eyes with something just outside the fence line, piercing luminous orbs that seemed intelligent and unrelenting. When flashlights were shined into the desert, nothing was there. No animals, no intruders, nothing but the endless stretch of sand and rock. And yet the eyes would return, lingering just long enough to send chills racing down their spines. Some staff members believe these glowing eyes belonged to restless spirits of inmates who died within the prison, still bound to the grounds in a spectral form, unable to move on. The prison has a long history of violence, riots, and untold suffering, which may help explain why the atmosphere feels so thick with unease. Inmates over the years have taken their own lives in despair, or perished in brutal fights behind closed doors. Death has left its mark on the institution, and some say the walls themselves seem to absorb the misery. Visitors on tours have described an oppressive heaviness when entering certain cell blocks, as though dozens of unseen eyes are watching. Many people report sudden drops in temperature and unnerving sensation in the desert heat, where temperatures should remain stifling well into the night. Even more disturbing are the physical encounters. Some guards and maintenance workers have admitted, though only in hushed tones, to being shoved or grabbed by invisible hands while making their rounds. They describe it as a sudden, forceful push that sends them stumbling forward, or the icy grip of fingers wrapping around their arms before vanishing. One former staff member confessed that after being shoved so hard in a stairwell that he nearly fell, he refused to ever work night shifts again. The fear of being alone with something unseen was more than he could bear. The solitary cells are particularly notorious, isolated and suffocating. These rooms were designed to break the spirit of any prisoner unlucky enough to end up there. Today, they are said to radiate dread so strong that even the bravest visitors hesitate to step inside. Some have entered only to feel sudden waves of panic, their hearts racing and their breath quickening as though they were being smothered. Others say they hear muffled voices whispering in the dark, words they cannot quite make out, but which send them fleeing the cell in terror. These solitary chambers are perhaps the strongest reminder of the prison's haunted legacy, where the cries of those who suffered remain etched into the air. Stories of ghostly prisoners walking the grounds are also common. Guards and staff sometimes glimpse shadowy figures in the hallways, fleeting silhouettes dressed in prison uniforms from another era. These figures vanish as quickly as they appear, often dissolving into thin air right before the witness's eyes. On more than one occasion, a guard has rushed to confront what they thought was an escaped inmate, only to find themselves standing alone in the silent corridor, with the echoes of phantom footsteps fading into nothingness. What makes La Tuna's haunting even more unsettling is its isolation. Unlike urban prisons, where the sounds of the city might bleed through the walls, La Tuna stands in the midst of desert silence. When the sun sets, darkness blankets the facility, broken only by the dim prison lights and the endless stars above. In that silence, the smallest sound becomes magnified: the creak of a door, the rattle of chains, or the faint echo of footsteps where no one walks. It is in this stillness that many say the spirits come alive, free to wander in the liminal space between the living and the dead. Some locals believe the prison is cursed by the desert itself. They say the land carries an ancient energy tied to the suffering of generations past. Indigenous legends warn of spirits that roam the sands at night, drawn to places of pain and confinement. Whether these stories are folklore or something more, they add to the sinister aura surrounding the prison. La Tuna Federal Correctional Institution may operate as a modern prison, but the legends surrounding it suggest that its walls are home to more than just the living. Phantom prisoners, glowing eyes in the desert, and unseen forces that stalk the corridors serve as chilling reminders that suffering leaves echoes, and some souls are never truly freed. For those who walk the grounds, the line between reality and nightmare is perilously thin, and the desert wind carries more than just sand. It carries the voices of the damned. Fort Delaware, perched on Peapatch Island in the Delaware River, is a fortress steeped in both history and haunting. Built in the mid-19th century, it was intended as a coastal defense, but its most infamous role came during the American Civil War, when it became a prison for thousands of Confederate soldiers, crowded into cold, damp cells. These men endured disease, starvation, and despair. Over 2,500 prisoners died within its walls, leaving behind a lingering energy that some say has never left. Today, visitors and paranormal investigators report a host of strange phenomena, from ghostly apparitions to chilling sounds that echo through the fort's corridors. The fort's isolation on the river contributes to its eerie atmosphere, surrounded by water, with only the creaking of old docks and the distant calls of gulls. Breaking the silence, Fort Delaware feels removed from the living world. As night falls, the fort seems to awaken. Many who walk the ramparts or explore the abandoned cells speak of cold drafts that appear inexplicably, chills that move along the spine, and a general sense of being watched. Some have reported feeling an almost tangible presence pressing down upon them, as if the weight of hundreds of souls still confined here is palpable. One of the most commonly reported phenomena at Fort Delaware is the sighting of ghostly soldiers. Visitors describe shadowy figures in Civil War-era uniforms moving silently through the hallways, pacing the corridors, or standing at the end of a cell block before vanishing into the darkness. Some claim to see these figures performing their daily routines, shuffling from barracks to the mess hall, or patrolling as if expecting orders. Others have caught glimpses of soldiers in small groups, hunched over and whispering among themselves in voices that cannot be heard, their movements ghostly and fluid, almost out of sync with reality. In addition to visual sightings, the fort is alive with sound. AVP recordings taken by paranormal investigators frequently capture the moans of the sick and dying, the distant screams of prisoners, and whispered conversations in a long-dead dialect. Some investigators have recorded the clanging of unseen iron doors and chains rattling along empty corridors. Tour guides occasionally report hearing footsteps behind them on empty hallways or the low murmur of men talking when no one is nearby. The sheer volume of these auditory phenomena makes it clear to many that Fort Delaware is more than just a historical site. It is a place where the past refuses to rest. The infirmary is one of the most active areas in the fort. During the Civil War, disease ran rampant, and countless men perished in pain and isolation. Visitors today report sudden drops in temperature, the smell of antiseptic mixed with decay, and shadowy forms moving across the corners of their vision. Some claim to hear coughing, wheezing, and labored breathing emanating from empty rooms. A few have even seen ghostly figures lying in beds or sitting against the walls, eyes hollow, silently watching as the living walk past. The weight of suffering from those who died in this space seems to linger, creating a sense of dread that is difficult to shake. The cells themselves hold countless stories of despair, packed tightly with prisoners. Many men succumb to illness or starvation. Tourists often report feeling an oppressive atmosphere when entering these narrow spaces, with sudden drops in temperature and feelings of unease. Some describe hearing whispered names or phrases, as though the spirits of the dead are attempting to reach the living. Others experience tactile sensations, an unseen hand brushing against their arm, or a sudden pressure in the small, dimly lit rooms. These interactions, though brief, leave a lasting impression of the fort's haunted history. Even the exterior of the fort is not free from ghostly activity. On quiet nights, some visitors have reported seeing figures moving along the walls and ramparts, silhouetted against the moonlit sky. Shadows appear to march in formation, disappearing as quickly as they materialize. Others have reported hearing the clatter of imaginary artillery or the distant cries of soldiers across the water, sounds that vanish as soon as the living attempt to locate their source. The isolation of Peapatch Island amplifies these experiences, making the boundary between past and present, living and dead, almost imperceptible. Fort Delaware's reputation as a haunted site has drawn historians, paranormal investigators, and tourists alike. Many come hoping for a brush with history, but leave with accounts of experiences they cannot fully explain. Shadowy soldiers, disembodied voices, and chilling cold spots serve as reminders that the fort is more than stone and mortar. It is a repository of human suffering and unresolved spirits. Visitors often leave in silence, moved by the weight of what has transpired within these walls. The fort's haunting is a testament to the human cost of war. The thousands who lived and died here left a mark that cannot be erased, an imprint of agony and resilience that still lingers. Whether one believes in ghosts or not, the energy of Fort Delaware is undeniable. For those who walk its halls, it is impossible to ignore the presence of something beyond the physical. A reminder that the past is never truly gone, and that in certain places, the cries of the dead continue to echo across time. Sing Sing Correctional Facility, located on the banks of the Hudson River in Ossining, New York, is one of the most infamous prisons in American history. Opened in 1826, it quickly gained notoriety for its harsh conditions, overcrowded cells, and the frequent use of the electric chair, known as Old Sparky. Over the decades, more than 600 men were executed here, many for crimes that shocked the public. The prison's legacy of violence and despair has left a mark that some say transcends the living world. Today, visitors, former staff, and paranormal investigators report a range of eerie phenomena, from phantom screams to shadowy figures, particularly around the execution chamber and the prison's most notorious cell blocks. The atmosphere at Sing Sing is heavy and oppressive, even for those unacquainted with its dark history. Walking through the prison's long, narrow corridors, visitors often describe a sense of being watched, as if unseen eyes follow their every movement. The combination of stone walls, iron bars, and the remnants of past suffering creates a palpable tension that seems to cling to the very air. Many report sudden drops in temperature, cold spots appearing in hallways where no ventilation exists. These encounters are often brief but intense, leaving visitors shaken long after they leave the facility. The execution chamber is considered the heart of Sing Sing's haunted reputation. It is here, amid the darkened walls and flickering lights, that over 600 men met their end in the electric chair. Paranormal accounts frequently focus on this room. Visitors describe hearing phantom screams and cries, sometimes echoing in bursts, as though replaying moments of past executions. Others report seeing shadowy figures hovering near the chair, their features indistinct but their presence unmistakable. Some claim to witness the spirits of executed prisoners pacing the floor, as if endlessly reliving their final moments. Investigators have also captured unexplained noises on audio devices, including metallic clanging, the faint smell of burnt hair, and the low hum of electricity when no power is running, reinforcing the chamber's sinister reputation. Beyond the execution chamber, Sing Sing's cell blocks are notoriously active. Inmates of the past endured overcrowding, harsh punishment, and extreme isolation. Visitors report hearing the clanging of cell doors, echoes of footsteps, and the occasional whisper or muttered name that seems to come from the walls themselves. Shadowy figures have been spotted moving among the barred cells, sometimes peering out or passing silently along the corridors. Some have even felt a sudden, inexplicable pressure in their chest, or a cold hand brush their arm while alone, leaving a lingering fear that the prison's spirits are still enforcing a form of order long after their deaths. The prison yard, with its chain-link fences and looming guard towers, also holds eerie reports. Witnesses describe hearing voices carrying across the open space, seemingly disembodied but filled with emotion, guard, despair, and sometimes desperation. Some claim to see figures in prison uniforms pacing in formation, disappearing when approached. Others report feeling an overwhelming sense of isolation and dread, as though the air itself carries the energy of decades of confinement and suffering. Staff members, past and present, have occasionally shared unsettling experiences. Some speak of objects moving on their own, lights flickering, and doors slamming without explanation. Inmates themselves have reported shadowy figures lurking near their cells, whispering voices, and sudden drops in temperature. These accounts suggest that Sing Sing's haunted reputation is not merely folklore, but a phenomenon that affects anyone who spends extended time within its walls. Paranormal investigators continue to explore the facility, drawn by its history and documented activity. Many have reported capturing EVP recordings with disembodied voices, calling out, sometimes pleading or crying. Some have photographed unexplained shadows or figures that cannot be attributed to known sources. Thermal imaging often reveals cold spots that defy explanation, and many who enter report feeling an oppressive weight that makes it difficult to move freely. Even seasoned investigators sometimes leave shaken, convinced that the residual energy of suffering and death lingers in the prison long after the human occupants are gone. Sing Sing also harbors stories of more personal hauntings. Some visitors claim to see the figures of individual prisoners, identifiable by their posture or movement, walking among the cells or standing silently by the execution chamber. These spirits appear restless, as if trapped between life and death, unable to find peace. Others have reported hearing their names called softly in the hallways, only to find no one there, reinforcing the idea that the prison holds the lingering consciousness of those who suffered and died within its walls. The prison's proximity to the Hudson River adds another layer of eerie. On misty mornings, the fog rolling in from the water can make the cell blocks appear ghostly from a distance, blending with the reports of shadowy figures and unexplained movement. Tour guides often recount stories of visitors sensing sudden chills, hearing phantom footsteps echoing from the riverbank, and feeling watched even outside the prison walls. The natural environment, combined with Sing Sing's storied history, creates an atmosphere that many describe as thick with residual energy. Sing Sing Correctional Facility remains operational today, but its haunted legacy endures. Those who walk its corridors, whether as visitors, staff, or paranormal investigators, often report experiences that cannot be easily explained. Shadowy figures, phantom screams, and oppressive energy seem to be woven into the fabric of the prison, a lasting testament to the pain, fear, and suffering of generations of inmates. For anyone stepping into Sing Sing, the past is never truly past, it is alive, echoing through the iron bars and stone walls, a chilling reminder of a history steeped in darkness. Nevada State Prison, located in Carson City, Nevada, has long been infamous for its dark and violent history. Opened in 1862, it served as one of the state's primary correctional facilities for 150 years before closing its doors in 2012. Throughout its operation, it witnessed countless executions, riots, and violent altercations, earning a reputation as one of the most haunted prisons in America. Today, despite being decommissioned, the prison continues to draw attention from ghost hunters, paranormal enthusiasts, and curious visitors who report unnerving encounters that hint at the lingering spirits of those who suffered and died within its walls. Walking through Nevada State Prison is like stepping back into a time of relentless punishment and fear. The building's austere architecture, with its heavy stone walls, rusted iron bars, and dimly lit corridors, reflects the grim reality of life behind bars. Visitors often describe an immediate feeling of unease, as though the very air carries the weight of decades of human suffering. Cold spots appear suddenly in hallways, and even on warm days, some report feeling icy drafts that seem to follow them. The combination of oppressive silence and the building's storied past creates an atmosphere thick with tension, making the prison's haunted reputation feel tangible. The death chamber remains the epicenter of Nevada State Prison's paranormal activity. Over the decades, numerous inmates met their end here, many by lethal injection. Paranormal reports frequently focus on this room, where visitors claim to hear the faint hum of machinery, footsteps pacing the floor, and even agonized cries echoing off the walls. Some witnesses have seen shadowy figures standing near the chamber, sometimes resembling inmates in old prison uniforms. Others report feeling a sudden, heavy pressure in the room, as if the energy of those executed still clings to the space. Investigators often leave the chambers shaken, recounting experiences that defy rational explanation. Beyond the death chamber, Nevada State Prison's cell blocks are notoriously active. Visitors walking down the long, narrow corridors often report hearing clanging doors, the scraping of chains, and voices murmuring in the darkness. Shadowy figures have been seen drifting between cells, sometimes pausing to stare silently before vanishing. Some guests have felt the sensation of invisible hands brushing against them or a presence following closely, only to turn and find the hall empty. Even seasoned paranormal researchers often note a heightened sense of dread that seems to intensify as they explore deeper into the prison. The prison yard is another area rich with reports of supernatural phenomena. Those wandering the open grounds describe hearing phantom footsteps behind them, whispers carried by the wind, and occasional glimpses of figures pacing the grounds as if on patrol. The imposing guard towers, once filled with watchful eyes, are now silent. Yet many report seeing ghostly silhouettes standing vigil. The combination of open space and residual energy from decades of confinement and executions creates a chilling contrast, amplifying the feeling that the prison's history is far from forgotten. Staff and former guards have shared numerous accounts of unexplained occurrences during their time at Nevada State Prison. Some recount lights flickering, doors swinging open and shut on their own, and objects moving without explanation. Inmates have reported shadowy figures standing in the corners of their cells or walking silently through the hallways. Many describe hearing faint whispers calling their names or low murmurs that seem to come from nowhere, adding to the facility's eerie reputation. Even after its closure, these stories persist, suggesting that the energy of suffering and death continues to linger within the prison. Paranormal investigators frequently explore Nevada State Prison, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural. Many have reported recording EVPs, disembodied voices caught on audio devices often, including cries for help or words of anger and despair. Thermal imaging cameras have detected cold spots that defy explanation, and night vision footage occasionally reveals unexplained shadows moving through the cell blocks. Investigators describe a heavy, almost tangible presence that can be felt throughout the prison, particularly near the death chamber and solitary confinement areas, reinforcing the idea that the spirits of those who suffered here are far from at rest. In addition to the death chamber and cell blocks, solitary confinement areas are particularly active. These small, confined spaces were designed to isolate inmates for extended periods, often leading to extreme psychological distress. Visitors today report a sense of overwhelming dread when entering these cells, accompanied by sudden chills, whispers, and, in some cases, fleeting glimpses of figures pressed against the walls. The oppressive energy in these areas seems to echo the torment of past prisoners, creating an environment that many find difficult to endure for long periods. Even outside the main prison buildings, the grounds of Nevada State Prison are said to carry residual energy. Tourists walking the perimeter or exploring the surrounding property have reported strange sounds in the night, unexplained shadows among the trees, and a feeling of being watched. The combination of the prison's storied past, its executions, and the countless lives affected by its harsh conditions, seems to have left an indelible mark, one that transcends the physical walls of the facility. Despite its closure in 2012, Nevada State Prison remains a magnet for those drawn to its haunted history. From shadowy figures drifting through cell blocks to phantom footsteps echoing in the death chamber, the prison offers a chilling glimpse into a past steeped in pain and despair. Visitors often leave shaken, haunted not just by the stories they've heard, but by the palpable sense that the spirits of Nevada State Prison are still very much present, lingering in the shadows, waiting for the next curious soul to wander its haunted halls. Fort Leavenworth Disciplinary Barracks, located in Leavenworth, Kansas, is not just a historic military prison, but also a site steeped in dark and unsettling legends, established to hold the U.S. military's most dangerous and unruly prisoners. The barracks quickly developed a reputation not only for its strict discipline, but also for the eerie phenomena reported over the decades, beyond the harsh reality of military incarceration. Countless accounts from guards, visitors, and paranormal investigators suggest that the facility is haunted by restless spirits, often manifesting as shadowy soldiers and disembodied sounds that echo through the stone corridors. Walking through the grounds of Fort Leavenworth Disciplinary Barracks feels like stepping into another era, where the rigid rules of military discipline governed every aspect of life. The imposing stone and brick buildings, with their high walls, barred windows, and watchtowers, create an atmosphere of authority and control, but beneath that authority lurks a palpable sense of unease. Many who enter report an overwhelming feeling of being observed, as if invisible eyes are tracking every move. Cold spots appear inexplicably in hallways and rooms, and some visitors have felt sudden drops in temperature, even on warm days, accompanied by goosebumps and a sense of foreboding. One of the most frequently reported phenomena at Fort Leavenworth is the sighting of shadowy soldiers. Guards past and present recount experiences of seeing figures dressed in old military uniforms, marching in perfect formation along the prison grounds or down the main hallways. These apparitions often appear out of the corner of one's eye, vanishing when directly looked at, leaving an uneasy impression that history is somehow repeating itself. Witnesses describe the sounds of boots striking the ground in perfect unison, echoing across the stone corridors, as if the barracks is still a living, breathing military post. Some have reported hearing low, stern commands issued by voices that seem to come from nowhere, as though the spirits of long-dead sergeants are still enforcing discipline. The prison cells themselves are another hotspot for paranormal activity. Former guards and inmates recount hearing the scraping of metal against stone, the rattling of chains, and whispers emanating from empty cells. Many report a sense of invisible presence in the confined spaces, occasionally feeling the sensation of a hand brushing against their arm or a weight pressing down on their shoulders. These experiences are most intense in solitary confinement cells, where the combination of isolation and residual energy from decades of punishment creates a deeply unsettling atmosphere. Investigators often note that even brief visits to these areas leave a lasting impression, with feelings of oppression and anxiety lingering long after leaving the building. The barracks dining hall and parade grounds are not immune to strange occurrences either. Guests and staff have reported hearing phantom footsteps and the sound of marching soldiers during times when the buildings are empty. Doors swing open and close on their own, lights flicker without explanation, and the air sometimes carries an unnatural chill, as if the energy of the past continues to influence the present. Some visitors have even witnessed fleeting glimpses of figures standing silently at attention, only to disappear when approached. These sightings are accompanied by a deep, almost physical sensation of tension, a reminder that the barracks' history of strict discipline and harsh punishment continues to echo in subtle and disturbing ways. Paranormal investigators frequently visit Fort Leavenworth Disciplinary Barracks in search of evidence. Using audio recording devices, night vision cameras, and thermal imaging, many have captured anomalous phenomena that defy explanation. Electronic voice phenomena, EVPs, often record distant footsteps, whispered orders, and low murmurs that cannot be traced to any living source. Some investigators have reported shadowy forms moving along the walls or disappearing into corners where no one could physically be standing. These experiences contribute to the prison's reputation as one of the most haunted military facilities in the United States. Visitors to Fort Leavenworth also report emotional and psychological effects that are difficult to attribute to imagination alone. Many describe an intense feeling of dread or unease that increases the longer they remain inside. Some have experienced sudden feelings of being watched, the sensation of invisible hands guiding or pushing them, or even hearing voices calling their names in distant hallways. These encounters are often accompanied by cold spots, flickering lights, and inexplicable sounds that suggest the barracks is more than just a relic of military discipline. It is a place where the past is never truly gone. Even the exterior grounds hold their share of eerie stories. The prison's surrounding areas, including the parade grounds and guard towers, have been sites of shadowy sightings and unexplained noises. Many visitors claim to hear marching in perfect time, the sound of rifles being carried or placed on racks, and orders shouted across empty courtyards. The combination of the prison's military history and its long-standing reputation for strict control seems to have left an imprint, one that manifests in ghostly echoes of soldiers long gone. Despite being an active military prison, Fort Leavenworth Disciplinary Barracks continues to fascinate and terrify those drawn to its haunted history. Shadowy soldiers, the sound of boots striking in unison, cold spots, and whispers from empty cells create an environment where the past and present collide in unsettling ways. The barracks' long-standing reputation for strict discipline, harsh punishment, and death has ensured that the spirits of those who lived and suffered within its walls remain, wandering silently, marching relentlessly, and leaving an indelible mark on all who enter. For those who step inside Fort Leavenworth Disciplinary Barracks, the experience is more than a historical visit. It is a chilling reminder that the echoes of the past, especially one built on fear and control, can linger far longer than anyone expects. Shadows move where no one stands, boots strike the ground in perfect cadence, and the whispers of soldiers past continue to remind all who enter that some ghosts never leave. Salem Jail, located in the heart of Massachusetts, is a chilling reminder of the town's dark past. Known for its connections to the infamous witch trials of the late 1600s, the jail has long been a site of fear, suffering, and death. Over the centuries, it housed not only accused witches but also petty criminals, murderers, and those awaiting execution. The combination of historical tragedy, harsh punishments, and human desperation has left an indelible mark on the structure, creating an atmosphere thick with lingering spirits and unexplained phenomena. Visitors to the jail often remark on an overwhelming feeling of dread, as though the walls themselves hold the echoes of centuries-old suffering. Walking through the jail's narrow stone-lined corridors, visitors immediately sense a weight that cannot be attributed solely to the heavy architecture. Doors creak and slam shut seemingly on their own, and sudden cold drafts sweep through hallways where no windows exist. Many have reported hearing screams in the night, cries of anguish that vanish as quickly as they appear, leaving only a chilling silence in their wake. It is as if the torment of past inmates continues to reverberate through the jail, refusing to fade with time. The cells themselves are perhaps the most active areas, small and dark, with iron bars and minimal light. They once confined individuals under extreme conditions. Visitors have reported ghostly figures appearing in these cells, figures dressed in colonial-era clothing, moving slowly or pausing to stare through the bars. Some appear translucent, flickering in and out of view, while others seem almost solid, giving a jarring sense of proximity. Witnesses often describe a sudden, unshakable feeling of being watched, as if the spirits are aware of every movement and every word spoken within their domain. One particularly eerie aspect of Salem Jail is the recurring reports of footsteps echoing in empty corridors. Tour groups and paranormal investigators alike have noted that the footsteps often come from directions where no one is present. And sometimes, multiple sets of steps are heard simultaneously. In some cases, visitors have felt cold hands brush against their shoulders or a gentle tug on clothing, moments that create a visceral sense of contact with an unseen presence. The sensation is fleeting but unmistakable, leaving a lingering unease long after leaving the building. Historical events add weight to the jail's haunted reputation. During the witch trials, individuals accused of practicing witchcraft were held here in agonizing conditions, often awaiting public execution. Many died in their cells, whether from disease, despair, or mistreatment. And the energy of these violent and unjust deaths seems to have remained trapped within the stone walls. Later, the jail continued to house criminals who experienced similar fates, contributing to a cumulative atmosphere of pain, fear, and unrest. Each event layered upon the last, creating a space in which the living can feel the echoes of the past in stark, sometimes terrifying ways. Visitors frequently describe experiencing sudden shifts in temperature, particularly in areas where spirits are said to congregate. A warm summer day can suddenly feel icy cold, a drop in temperature that is often accompanied by a shiver or goosebumps. These cold spots are sometimes localized to specific cells or hallways, and those who linger in these areas often report a deep sense of unease, as if invisible eyes are scrutinizing them. Lights occasionally flicker without cause. Shadows seem to move independently of natural light sources, and strange whispers can be heard, though no one is present to produce them. Paranormal investigations of Salem Jail have captured audio evidence and visual anomalies that reinforce its haunted reputation. Electronic voice phenomena, AVP recordings, have picked up fragmented cries, urgent whispers, and even faint, eerie laughter. Cameras and thermal imaging have documented shadowy forms moving through the halls, sometimes darting past visitors or appearing in places where no one should be. Some investigators have reported feeling an oppressive weight or pressure on their bodies, as if the collective anguish of the past inmates manifests in the present. Even during guided tours, the jail's haunted nature is palpable. Guides often share accounts of previous visitors encountering ghostly figures, hearing disembodied voices, or experiencing sudden cold drafts. These stories, coupled with the historical context of Salem's witch trials, create a chilling narrative that draws the curious, the brave, and the fascinated. Yet many leave with a heightened sense of the building's power, acknowledging that the spirits within are far from dormant. Salem Jail is more than a historical site. It is a living testament to the suffering and injustices of the past. Its walls, corridors, and cells bear silent witness to the anguish of countless individuals whose lives ended under cruel or mysterious circumstances. Visitors who enter the jail often leave with an indelible impression of the spirits that linger, sensing the presence of those who have not moved on. The combination of history, architecture, and unexplained phenomena makes Salem Jail one of New England's most compelling and terrifying haunted locations. For anyone drawn to history, mystery, or the paranormal, a visit to Salem Jail is both educational and unnerving. The cries of the past resonate through its stone walls, and the ghostly figures wandering its corridors remind us that some spirits are bound to the places of their suffering. The echoes of centuries-old torment continue to haunt Salem Jail, offering a chilling glimpse into the past and a stark reminder that some places are never truly at peace. Here, visitors do not simply witness history, they feel it, encounter it, and sometimes are not alone within it. Angola Prison, officially known as the Louisiana State Penitentiary, stands as one of the most notorious correctional facilities in the United States. Its grim reputation stems not only from the harsh realities of modern incarceration, but also from the dark history embedded in the land itself. Built on a former slave plantation, the grounds carry echoes of generations of suffering and brutality. Many believe that the spirits of both prisoners and enslaved individuals continue to linger, their pain and unrest saturating the air. Visitors to Angola often report an overwhelming sense of sadness, cold spots, and shadowy figures moving just beyond the edges of sight, making the prison a place as haunted as it is infamous. The sprawling facility covers over 18,000 acres, including massive cell blocks, fields, guard towers, and a sprawling death row. Walking through the prison grounds, it is easy to sense a heavy, oppressive energy. Longtime staff members have spoken of inexplicable chills and the feeling of being watched, even in areas where no other person is present. Visitors often describe the same sensations: footsteps echoing in empty hallways, doors opening or closing on their own, and sudden drops in temperature that seem to defy the humid Louisiana climate. These phenomena are particularly pronounced in the older cell blocks, where decades of confinement, violence, and despair have left an indelible mark. The cell blocks themselves are a focal point of paranormal activity. Inmates past and present have endured harsh punishments in these concrete corridors, and many of the spirits reportedly remain tethered to the spaces where they suffered. Witnesses describe shadowy figures pacing silently, disappearing when approached, and feeling cold. Invisible hands brush against them. Some claim to hear whispers, muffled conversations, urgent pleas, or anguished cries that vanish as quickly as they appear. Paranormal investigators, equipped with cameras and recording devices, often capture fleeting images, unexplained orbs of light, or distorted voices on EVP recordings, lending further weight to the stories of supernatural presence. Death row at Angola carries its own particular aura of unease. Historically, executions were carried out with grim finality, and the emotional intensity of those moments seems to have left lingering impressions. Visitors report that this area feels particularly heavy, as if the very walls remember the fear, anger, and despair of men awaiting their fate. Cold spots appear randomly, even in the sweltering heat, and some claim to feel invisible pressure against their chest, a sensation so strong that it causes unease or panic. The echoes of anguished screams, whether imagined or spiritual, seem to resonate from the past, reaching across time to touch the living. The plantation origins of the site add another layer of darkness. Long before it became a prison, the land was a place of forced labor and suffering. Enslaved people endured unimaginable hardships, and the oppression and pain of those times are said to have left their own spectral residue. Some visitors report sensing figures wandering the outer fields at night, shadows that do not correspond to any physical person. Others have heard low, mournful wails or whispers that sound older than the prison itself, a haunting reminder that Angola's history is layered, tragic, and complex. Even during the day, Angola's atmosphere can be unnerving. The sprawling grounds, combined with the isolation of the facility and the towering walls of the cell blocks, create a sense of confinement and invisibility. Visitors describe feeling watched as they explore the perimeter, the sensation that eyes unseen are following every movement. Hallways stretch long and narrow, punctuated by empty cells that seem to hum with past energy. Light filters in through small windows, casting stark shadows that flicker with an almost human presence, making it difficult to distinguish between imagination and spectral phenomenon. Many who venture into Angola's haunted spaces report that the activity is not uniformly aggressive. Some experiences are subtle, a fleeting shadow, a whispered phrase, a sudden chill. Others are more intense, with invisible forces pushing, touching, or following those who explore the prison. Guides often caution visitors to respect the history and the energy of the place, as the combination of human suffering, historical trauma, and lingering unrest creates an environment unlike any other. It is a location where the past is never fully buried, where the line between the living and the dead seems thin, and where the weight of countless lives lost is palpable. Photographers and paranormal teams frequently attempt to document the unexplained phenomena, capturing strange lights, moving shadows, and distorted figures on film. AVP recordings have recorded voices pleading for help or uttering words that cannot be explained. Some claim to hear the cries of both prisoners and enslaved people simultaneously, overlapping across time. Each encounter reinforces the idea that Angola is not merely a prison, but a repository for unresolved pain and lingering spirits, a place where history is etched into every wall, corridor, and field. Angola Prison remains active, yet its haunting legacy continues to attract those drawn to the supernatural. Whether it is the dark history of slavery, the cruelty of incarceration, or the restless spirits of men who spent their lives within its walls, the prison exudes a palpable sense of unease. Shadowy forms, whispers in the corridors, and sudden drops in temperature remind visitors that this is a place where the past refuses to remain silent. It is a stark reminder that some places carry the weight of history so heavily that it lingers long after the living have departed, leaving behind a realm where the spirits of the oppressed and the imprisoned coexist, and the echoes of their suffering remain impossible to ignore. Burlington County Prison, located in Mount Holly, New Jersey, is a site steeped in history and dark tales. Constructed in the early 19th century, this massive stone structure once held inmates who faced harsh punishments, overcrowding, and brutal conditions. Today, the prison has been converted into a museum, preserving its historical significance. Yet it is impossible to ignore the lingering presence of the countless souls who suffered within its walls. Visitors and staff alike have reported eerie occurrences that suggest the prison's tortured past still permeates the building, making it one of New Jersey's most haunted sites. Walking through the main corridors, one is immediately struck by the oppressive atmosphere. The thick stone walls, though impressive architecturally, seem to trap an energy that is difficult to escape. Footsteps echo through the hallways long after the museum's visitors have moved on, and some report hearing the sound of chains dragging across the floors, though no one is in sight. In certain areas, the temperature suddenly drops without explanation, a coldness that feels almost sentient, as though the building itself remembers the suffering endured within its cells. The cells themselves are hotspots for paranormal activity. Many visitors claim to hear sobbing and whispers emanating from behind the iron bars, as if the inmates are attempting to communicate from beyond the grave. Some have even described seeing ghostly figures pressing their hands against the bars, reaching out in silent despair. The apparitions are often partial or shadowy, flickering in and out of view, making it difficult to discern whether they are real or imagined. But those who have encountered them swear they are tangible and terrifyingly human. One particularly haunted area is the solitary confinement block. Here, the walls are thick, the rooms narrow, and the air feels heavier. Historical records indicate that inmates in these cells were subjected to extreme isolation, often for weeks at a time, which sometimes drove them to madness or worse. Today, visitors report an overwhelming sense of anxiety when standing in these cramped spaces. Some experience sudden, sharp headaches, a racing heartbeat, or the sensation of being watched. Others have reported hearing anguished cries echoing through the hallways, a sound so realistic that it can be startling, even when no one else is present. The prison's history adds depth to its hauntings. Over the years, Burlington County Prison housed individuals convicted of crimes ranging from petty theft to murder. Executions and harsh punishments were common, and violence between inmates occurred frequently. Each of these tragedies seems to have left an imprint on the structure. Guides often share stories of inmates who reportedly linger, unable to move on due to the trauma they endured. Some visitors claim to feel invisible hands lightly brushing against them, or a sudden pressure on their shoulders, a chilling reminder that the spirits may be interacting with the living world. Even during daytime tours, subtle paranormal activity is frequently reported. Shadows appear to move against the flow of natural light, and doors sometimes creak or slam shut on their own. Visitors have described hearing whispers that sound like fragmented conversations, cries for help, or simple words like "don't leave me" echoing through the halls. In some cases, groups of visitors have experienced these occurrences simultaneously, suggesting a collective witness to phenomena that cannot easily be explained by imagination alone. The exterior grounds of Burlington County Prison also carry a sense of unease. The surrounding walls and iron gates create a visual barrier that isolates the prison from the town beyond. At night, some visitors report seeing faint figures moving behind the stonework or along the prison yard, only to vanish when approached. These sightings are often accompanied by sudden gusts of cold air, inexplicable fog, or the feeling of being watched from a distance. Even the quietest nights seem charged with tension, as though the spirits of past inmates still patrol the grounds in restless vigilance. Paranormal investigators frequently visit the museum, attempting to capture evidence of supernatural activity. Using cameras, audio recorders, and thermal imaging, many have reported capturing unexplained anomalies, ghostly apparitions caught on film, footsteps echoing where no one walks, and voices recorded on EVP that cannot be attributed to any living person. Some of the recordings are chilling, featuring fragmented cries or murmured warnings that suggest the spirits are aware of the living presence in their domain. Visitors who spend extended time at Burlington County Prison often leave with a sense of reverence mixed with fear. The building serves as a reminder of the harsh realities of incarceration in the 19th and early 20th centuries, while also acting as a gateway to the supernatural. The combined weight of historical suffering, restless spirits, and unexplained phenomena makes it a uniquely haunting experience. Some guests claim that the prison feels alive in a way that is difficult to articulate, as though every stone, cell, and corridor retains a memory of pain and injustice. In the end, Burlington County Prison is more than just a museum. It is a place where history and the paranormal intersect. Its walls echo with the memories of those who suffered within, and its atmosphere continues to unsettle and fascinate those who enter. Ghostly figures behind bars, the sound of distant crying, sudden chills, and shadowy presences all serve as reminders that the spirits of the past have not entirely moved on. For anyone drawn to history, mystery, and the unexplained, Burlington County Prison offers a haunting journey into the depths of human suffering and the echoes that linger long after life has ended. Here, the living can glimpse the unseen, and the restless dead remind us that some places are never truly silent. And there you have it, to 25 of the scariest haunted prisons in America, each one soaked in pain, despair, and restless energy. These walls once held some of the darkest souls in history, but it seems the walls themselves absorb that darkness, echoing it back through shadowy figures, whispers, and screams that never fade. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, stepping inside these prisons is like stepping into another world, one where the past refuses to stay buried. If you ever find yourself near one of these places, remember, it's not just the living you need to fear, but the spirits who never found their escape. Sweet dreams. If you can,